Hello everyone, welcome to What If Issei and Akeno Were in a Hidden Relationship Before the Canon Timeline Movie 1. Before we start, please go support Charisarf1 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Issei is a male. This story takes place before the entire DxD saga, where in this story Issei Hyoudou falls in love with Akeno Himejima, but still with his dream of being the king of the harem with his queen Akeno. But the detail will be that they hide a secret that no one of their family and friends knows, a secret between them that will be a light for a future life. Prologue: The Truth. Burst. That was what was seen in a combat zone between two beings representing two legendary creatures of maximum power. One was a dragon, and the other a phoenix. And the representatives were Hyoudou Issei, the Sacerdotisa who faced a duel to the death against Rias Phoenix, Rias Gremry's fiancé. A few days ago, Hyoudou Issei was a normal second-year student, a hopeless pervert with the title of the Perverted Beast, who was known throughout Ko Academy along with his cronies, which were Matsuda and Motohama. Together they were the trio of perverts who always lurked around and spied on the girls. But one day the brown-haired boy had received a confection from an unknown girl who ran into him on a bridge on the way home. Amanuyuma was her name, but the brown-haired boy had rejected her love confection, taking the girl by surprise, who did not expect to be rejected, and without further ado the brown-haired boy left the place. As to why he rejected her, it was a mystery. Anyone could have said yes without a problem, but Hyoudou Issei was a different story, since in his heart he belonged to someone very special to him. Days passed and everything was normal until one Saturday, the brown-haired boy had gone downtown in search of a new game that he wanted to have in his possession, and eat some ice cream because it was warm and there was the time. But before he could taste his ice cream, a beautiful woman had given him a very peculiar pamphlet, and once she gave it to him, she left the place. Without further ado, the brown-haired boy was about to eat his two-flavored ice cream when suddenly his entire surroundings changed to a dark and gloomy one. The sky was purple and there was no trace of people around. Before he could realize something, the brown-haired boy could feel something hot passing through his stomach. When his gaze went down, he could see how the tip of a spear of light had pierced him, causing him pain, and he suffered more pain when the spear vanished, leaving Hyoudou Issei's blood to stain the ground. The brown-haired boy looked back, falling to his knees in pain. Right there was the same girl he had rejected. With his few strength he cursed her before falling to the ground on his side, with his blood covering the ground along with his two-flavored ice cream. The brown-haired boy's eyes became heavy, and before closing them he only asked for one wish, which was not to die. The last thing he saw before falling was a crimson flash that shone in front of him, and that was how Hyoudou Issei's normal life ended. The next day Hyoudou Issei discovered his new qualities, such as superhuman strength, the ability to see in the dark, and a strange weakness to sunlight. But leaving behind, the brown-haired boy continued testing his superhuman abilities until that night. After a rather exhausting day at school, the brown-haired boy returned home, but out of nowhere the sky turned purple and a man in a trench coat appeared with bad intentions. The man almost killed the poor brown-haired boy again if it weren't for the fact that someone had saved him, a girl he knew well, and that girl was Akeno Himejima. Once again the brown-haired boy saw the sunlight entering his room, where once again he believed it had been a dream. But it was not so, since someone else shared his bed, and that someone was the one who cheered up his morning and brought a smile to the brown-haired boy's face. Era, good morning, Anata. Her voice was a melody for the brown-haired boy, who just laid down again next to the female. Good morning, my Akeno, was his response before kissing the female on her sweet lips. Hyoudou Issei's human life had ended. But as they say, every beginning is an end, and every end is a beginning. The beginning of a demon's life on the path to greatness was beginning, and the question was if he was ready for that difficult path. Overcoming obstacles which were his weakness, Hyoudou Issei trained day by day to be strong. Even if his body reaches its limit, the flames of his courage made him keep going. He had a reason to become strong, and very soon there would be two. But the most difficult challenges for him were saving a friend who was in the hands of the fallen, who fortunately with all his effort achieved his goal of saving her, and incidentally taking care of the hitch that killed him. The second challenge came after a few days, when they went to visit the forest of the relatives, where only her friend Asia got one and the brown-haired boy did not. But she did get the best fan service with Slimer Devora clothes that made up for the other and more. At night she received a visit from her president with the sole purpose of maintaining her virginity. But the brown-haired boy rejected her for the simple fact that he would not do such a thing not without feeling love for each other. A few minutes later a woman in maid clothes and platinum hair arrived to take Rias, who reluctantly left saying goodbye to the brown-haired boy. The next day Issei went to the club where he found out about the engagement of his president, and the qualifying game he was going to participate in to avoid this engagement. For 10 days the entire occult club trained day by day to become stronger, and the final day arrived where the qualifying game would begin. Everything was going well with the elimination of half of Reiser Phoenix's entourage, Rias' fiancé, but all good things must end, and that was when the Phoenix entourage counterattacked by eliminating Kaneko for Reiser's queen, leaving Akeno to take care of her. Kiba and Issei fought with the remaining members of the Reiser peerage, where with a team attack from the two they ended up winning. But the Queen of Reiser attacked them from behind, eliminating Kiba and making it clear that she also killed Akeno. The feeling of anger clouded Issei's mind, who was in charge of eliminating the Queen of Reiser, leaving him alone with his little sister Ravel, who was just a spectator. With tooth and nail Hyoudou, Issei fought until the end, giving his all in that fight, but when he reached his limit his body began to fail, making it impossible to win. The result was Rias' defeat when she gave up, unable to continue enduring seeing her pawn massacred by the Phoenix, and so Issei ended up unconscious for 3 days and woke up just the same night where Rias' wedding was to take place. But this time Hyoudou Issei was not going to fail, and it was time for the second match against the fried chicken. Returning to the present. Both fighters exchanged blows after blows, no doubt with the sole desire to knock the other down. Issei sent a full blow under Phoenix's face, and Reiser counterattacked with a whirlwind of fire which did not affect the brown-haired boy, who sent him back to the ground with a headbutt and fell headlong on him, causing a mini tremor in the fight area. I admit it. Reiser leaves the crater to look at his opponent, who remained firm in his fighting stance. You are a stubborn lower-class being, I give you credit for that. I don't need you to recognize me, Yakitori, just give up already. Her tone of voice made her annoyance clear, but Reiser just laughed in her face. Ha ha ha, seriously, you are someone unique among your kind, said Reiser, who took his face to laugh and then looked fearlessly into the boy's eyes. I say you are unique because of how selfish you are. You are not the one to say that. The Sekiryutai responded to launch himself against the Phoenix, who also responds by launching himself against him. I don't mean that. The Reiser clash continues. The smug look he had did not give a good sign to the brown-haired boy, and decided to end this. He put more force into the power clash. Reiser is sent back like that, but rises into the air to be followed by the brown-haired boy in his armor, starting an aerial combat again, all being seen by the two entourages on both sides and the wedding guests along with Rias' brother Lucifer himself, but returning to the fight. I'm referring to the secret you're hiding from your own king, said Reiser, who dodged an attack from Issei and the aforementioned tense up upon hearing that. I see that I got it right. I may be conceited, but I never miss any detail of my enemy when I have him in front of me, he said while throwing several fireballs that were deflected by the brown-haired boy. I don't know what you're talking about, idiot, Issei answered, trying to end the fight, knowing that this was seen by everyone in the room and this secret he had should not come to light, not yet. But the brown-haired boy was not the only one who feared for that secret, and that person was Akeno Himejima herself. Off the battlefield on the balcony. Please Inada, finish this fight quickly. Akeno mentally prayed for this duel to end for 2 simple reasons. The first was that her secret was in danger of coming to light, and the second was a certain problem that brought the ebony hand straight to her belly. Although I'm not sure how much time I have, I know it's on the way. Akeno, are you okay? A voice took Himejima out of her thoughts, and she saw Rias, who looked at her. Yes, just a little nervous from the fight, that's all, she said while sweat ran down her face. You look different to me, you look paler, and you're sweating, she said before turning to the screen because of the sound of an explosion. Damn, not now, Akeno thought before bending her knees a little and trying to catch her breath. In the battle arena. Things were not going well for the brown-haired. Reiser kept attacking and evading his attacks, and the time left for the brown-haired was running out. If he didn't finish now within 1 minute, he would lose his armor and be at a disadvantage. Well, I see that this fight lasted longer than it should have, said the Phoenix, whose clothes were already somewhat worn, but it's time to end this, right, Sekiryutai? I agreed, said the one ready to fight. I must finish now, he whispered quietly. Somewhere in his being something was warning him that something important was about to happen, and it was better to finish this. You know, what my Queen Eubelina told me left me somewhat intrigued. It made me very curious. Once again Rias began to speak, knowing well that he was heard by everyone present, and Issei did not hesitate to rush at him. What is he talking about? Said Rias, who also heard what Rias said. I don't know, Bucho, but she's noticed that Issei-kun gets a bit aggressive when Rias talks about the subject, Kiba said, along with Kaneko, who nods at what Kiba said. It's like he wants to prevent me from talking at all costs, said Kaneko, looking at the screen. While Akeno was starting to get nervous and the harsh reality was taking its toll once again. Oh no, was the only thing Akeno thought before the imminent end. She told me, dodging the brown-haired boy's fist, that during their encounter the Gremory Queen always covered her belly. Rias shouted and sent the brown-haired boy to the ground. Shut up, Issei said, but Rias continued. And after thinking about it carefully and having Eubelina confirm it, everything became quite clear to me. Both of them clash attacks again, coming face to face, and from the look on Rias Gremory's face and the rest of her slaves' faces, I got the clear answer that they don't know yet, or I'm wrong, Seker Yudai. Shut the buck up, you bucking chicken, the brown-haired boy shouted in fury, ending the power clash again by sending Rias up and preparing a dragon shot to end this quick. What are you talking about? Rias, already a little tired of so much mystery, wanted to know the truth, and the other possible answer was at her side. Akeno, what are you hiding from me? She said in a serious tone. Rias, I don't know, what are you talking about? I don't know anything, she said, taking a step back. Don't lie to me. You and Issei are hiding something from me, and I want to know now. Rias wanted an answer, and Himejima didn't have the ball to tell her the truth. Bucho, I think you should calm down a little. Kiba, in an attempt to help, or rather calm his king, did not help much. Shut up, Kiba, she said, and Kiba shut up. Now Akeno. Rias looks her straight in the eyes and continues, what is that secret that Rias is talking so much about? Judging by your reaction, you have something to do with them without eyelashes. The Gremory looks at her queen, waiting for her to tell the truth once and for all. In Akeno's mind, she was inside a tornado of emotions, and her condition was getting worse. At any moment something big would explode, and she can't stop it, neither she nor her man. Tell me, Seker Yudai, when was I going to tell your king that you were expecting a descendant? There was a long silence after what Rias said, leaving many surprised and others somewhat interested in what the Phoenix Heir said. As for the chestnut's acquaintances, Lucifer himself was impressed, the same boy who saw him fight to save his sister, and now here at his wedding in search of revenge against Rias. That same boy was expecting a son or daughter. But here is the question, who is the lucky one? On the club members' side, the group had reacted differently. Kaneko herself, who was an expressionless girl, had opened her eyes wide at what Phoenix had said, thinking of who is so stupid as to end up with the son of her perverted senpai. On Kiba's side, he was in shock for a few seconds at that revelation. He expected several things from the perverted brown-haired boy, but being a father was the last thing on the list, and it was quite surprising to know. But the only one who was different was Rias Gremory. Something inside her had broken, followed by a feeling of someone very close stabbing her in the back. Her sight was in shock, and her gaze would be directed at the only person she could assume was part of that revelation. Akeno, she called her friend, who just looked at the floor without even daring to look at her. You are part of truth. A sea of emotions went through her head, and using all her strength to maintain her composure, she spoke to her friend. Akeno didn't even bother to turn to look at her in her eyes. She knew that there was no point in hiding it anymore. Joining her hands on her stomach, and a crimson light enveloped her completely, revealing her true form and also revealing what Rias feared. Akeno's appearance only had a few different changes. For example, her height went up a little. Her bust looked bigger than before, and the detail that most caught the attention of those present was a rather swollen belly. Rias Akeno spoke softly before her eyes became crystal clear from the tears contained in her eyes. I'm pregnant with Issei-kun, and I've known him for a long time. Himejima revealed, or rather finished revealing the truth, leaving Rias in shock before falling to her knees, taking both hands on her belly, and feeling wet something on her kimono. Oh no. The others, seeing this, were quick to go and help the brunette. Kiba and Kaneko helped her get up, noticing that Himejima's water broke and the baby was due to arrive that same night. Surzex asked Grafia to go with them to take the brunette to the Gremory Mansion's infirmary, Even though she didn't like the idea of leaving her younger sister aside with the problems she was having right now, she had to go and tell Hyoudou about what was happening. As for the fight that was taking place, after Rias revealed his secret, the brown-haired boy without hesitation launched the dragon shot that hit the phoenix squarely, weakening it enough to see that its regeneration was slower than before. Where he took advantage of the advantage and continued with the fight, knowing that in a few seconds he will run out of energy. But before continuing with the fight, Surzek's voice is heard through a communication circle that was formed near the brown-haired boy's ear. "Hyoudou, we have a problem," said the Mao, drawing attention and taking the brown-haired boy's mind off the fight for a few seconds. "Mao-sama, what's going on?" With a tone of respect, Issei speaks and Rias approaches. "You must finish this fight once and for all and come here immediately," said the Mao seriously as he approached his sister, who had not moved from where she was. "Your baby is on the way and that girl needs her partner." And before he could finish speaking, a loud bang was heard and the communication was disconnected. Hyoudou. In the arena, a cloud of dirt formed, leaving the spectators without seeing what was happening inside the fight. In a movement that came from within the cloud of dirt, the Hyoudou was seen with his armor brighter than before, with his arm extended and holding something, or rather someone. That someone was Rias, who, when he saw the brown-haired boy with his guard down, went straight to finish him off. But he noticed something, like if the brown-haired boy was talking to someone else, he didn't take it seriously and decided to finish the boy off by surprise. But he was the one surprised when the Hyoudou's claws dug into his face and a crimson light began to cover him. Fear began to form throughout the phoenix's body. The brown-haired boy's aura was different. Now it was dominant, pure and dark. It was as if suddenly something changed inside the boy, something for the better. Their gazes met when the brown-haired boy looked at him, and the crimson light completely covered his other arm where a fist was formed in his hand. "I can't waste my time with this useless fight anymore." His voice was deep like a real dragon's. He pulled back his fist and launched a precise blow to the phoenix's chest. "Goodbye." Those were the last words Rias heard before being sent crashing into the last chess piece-shaped tower in the arena. And so Rias Phoenix was defeated by being knocked unconscious by the brown-haired boy's powerful blow. Issei immediately left the arena upon seeing that he had won and reached the balcony where Surzek and a shocked Rias were. The armor faded into particles of light when the brown-haired boy reached his limit. Exhausted by the fight, the brown-haired boy remained standing. Looked at the Mao, and without doubt or fear he took him by the shoulders in desperation. "Where is she now?" he said, and Surzek took his hands and spoke in a calm tone. "Calm down, Hyoudou, she's fine. She's in good hands." The soft tone calmed the boy, and Surzek formed a magic circle under the Hyoudou's feet. "This will take you to the Gremory Castle. They were already warned of your arrival. Good luck, Hyoudou." Issei. With those last words, the brown-haired boy disappeared, and the Mao turned to see his sister, who was now crying, using her hands to cover her face. Surzek sighed for them. It was not what he expected, but at least his sister was free from this commitment, and that was what mattered to him before this turn of events. Gremory Mansion. The brown-haired boy once arrived straight to the first maid, who was nearby, to ask her where the mansion's infirmary was. The maid kindly gave him directions, and the brown-haired boy began to run in the direction he was told. After running for at least 10 minutes, he could see in the distance an acquaintance of his, who was Kiba, who upon seeing him approached him only to be taken by the shoulders and shaken by a brown-haired boy with a sea of emotions in his head. "Kiba, tell me where Akeno is, or I swear I'll castrate you." Alarmed, the boy can't control his strength and slams the unfortunate knight into a wall. The brown-haired boy was still too upset, and Kiba, already recovering, tried to calm him down only to be sent against the wall again. But his salvation was Kaneko, who, with just one good hit to the brown-haired boy, brought him back. "Ouch, Kaneko," the brown-haired boy complained to the lowly. "Calm down, Issei-senpai. Akeno-senpai is currently being treated by the doctors. Just wait." "Yes." With a neutral tone, the lowly sits back down, and the brown-haired boy copies the silver-haired girl's action, followed by Kiba, a little sore from the blows from before. The hours passed, and the brunette became more anxious and impatient with each passing minute. On several occasions he tried to enter the room where the brunette was, but Kaneko stopped him in each attempt, along with Kiba, who no longer bothered to leave the wall, knowing the painful fate that awaited him. After another hour, a sound resonates through the room where Akeno was, and the sound manages to pass through the door to be heard in the hallways. That sound brings the brown-haired boy out of his thoughts. who stands up from his seat with a sea of tears falling from the corners of his eyes and a ton of emotions that wouldn't stop running through his head. Unable to say anything due to the tears that kept falling down his face, Kiba approached and put his hand on his friend's shoulder. "Why are you still here? Go at once, your baby is waiting for you," he said, and the brown-haired boy hugged him, thanking him. But Issei couldn't control his strength and almost broke Kiba's back from the hug. Luckily for him, the brown-haired boy let go and went out the door where his beloved was waiting for him. "Why me?" Kiba thought as he cried comically while being comforted by Kaneko. Once he went through the door, the brown-haired boy was greeted by a doctor who was taking off his nursing gloves. When he saw him, he congratulated him and left with the assistants and nurses, who also congratulated him before leaving the brown-haired boy alone and the woman, who was surrounded by a large curtain. "Issei, is that you?" she asked, but the brown-haired boy didn't answer. A lump in her throat formed from her nerves, and she only moved forward until she was in front of the curtain that separated them both. Issei called her again, and the brown-haired boy with trembling hands took the end of the curtain, but without being able to open it yet. "Because I'm so nervous, I just have to draw this curtain and that's it, but I can't think," the brown-haired boy, who couldn't stop shaking from his nerves. But Akeno spoke again. "Issei," she said, and the brown-haired boy heard her. "I know you're nervous. I can see how you move the curtain." That comment stopped the boy from shaking. "But you don't have to worry. I know this will be new for both of us and even more for me. I'm with a baby in my arms at 18 years old. It's crazy, don't you believe it?" Yes, it's crazy, my father and your mother at 17 and 18 years old. Yes, it's crazy," he answered with grace. Akeno's voice was helping him, and the nerves along with the sea of emotions began to clamor. "Now that you know how crazy this is," she said before continuing, "to come and meet your son." The brown-haired boy took a breath, and with all the courage he had accumulated he moved the horn and entered to see the beautiful scene before his eyes. And Akeno, looking with much love at the fruit of the love between the two of them. After the baby was born, he cried loudly, but when his mother held him in her arms the crying calmed down, and the baby calmed down when he felt the presence of his mother. To give you an idea? Then Himejima sees her partner sending a signal for her to come closer, and she extended her arms for the brown-haired boy to receive her son. The nerves were obvious on her face, but the enormous happiness she felt now was another story. "What are we going to call him?" she asked. Even though they already knew what to name him, she just wanted her brown-haired boy to say it. "His name is Kurenai Himejima." With a determined tone, the brown-haired boy looks proudly at his son. "I like the way it sounds, but I like Kurenai Hyoudou more than you," she said as she gave her boyfriend some space on the bed. "Why not both and that's it?" he said before lying down next to her, putting Kurenai in the middle, and both of them intertwined their hands near their son. "You know very well that later we will have to explain this then to everyone, right?" Foo, I know very well, but let's not think about that now. For now I want to spend this moment with you and our baby. Besides, I'm very tired," she said while letting out a yawn. I know." My Akeno approaches her and kisses her. "For now let's rest," said Issei before putting his head on the pillow. "I love you, Akeno Himejima." "I love you, Issei Hyoudou." With that last thing they both closed their eyes to be able to rest for a while before the next thing that would come, a storm. Chapter 1. Moment before the story. The next morning, the eyes of a certain brown-haired boy began to open, making it clear that he was waking up. With the image somewhat blurry, the brown-haired boy rubbed his eyes to remove the irritation he had, and once his task was finished, his vision was clearer to let him see his surroundings better. For a second the brunette almost stepped back, and for a few seconds he almost let out a cry of surprise. But his hand was quicker and covered his mouth. "Well, it's not every day you wake up in a bed in front of your girlfriend and your baby." For the brown-haired boy, everything that happened hours ago was still new. First, the deal he made with Drade before going to save Rias from her engagement. The same brown-haired boy offered his heart in exchange for being able to have more power to save Rias and the others. The second case was when Rias revealed his secret, added to the news that Kurenai was about to be born, and that took him by surprise, although it did not prevent him from winning the fight with the strange increase in power he had at that moment. The third, which was the most recent, was when he saw his descendant for the first time. It was undoubtedly a quite peculiar continuation of mixed feelings. But not bad ones, but quite the opposite. But forgetting that moment, the brown-haired boy returns to his place on the bed to look at the face of his girlfriend. her soft lips along with some strands of her hair that went down to cover her face, making the brown-haired boy laugh, who moved those strands aside to continue contemplating the beautiful face of his girlfriend. But his attention was interrupted by a sound that made him look down where the baby was. The face of her son, who seemed to be in a moment of absolute peace, began to wrinkle with annoyance, signs that the baby was having some kind of bad dream, or there was some problem in his body, or maybe it was because he started to get hungry. Issei, being new to the subject of parenthood, began to panic, thinking of some way to prevent the baby from starting to cry, but thanks to the fact that he started the engine in his head, a vague memory crossed his mind. He had something to do with a casual conversation between his parents when he was at dinner. Memory. Inside the Hyoudou residence, 3 chestnuts could be seen eating at a table in the dining room of the house, which were Mickey and Goro Hyoudou along with their son Issei Hyoudou, who was distracted using his phone, leaving his parents talking to each other while they enjoyed dinner prepared by their mother. "Hey honey, one of my coworkers just became a father recently," said Goro while eating his dinner made by his wife. "What news? I'm sure you must be very happy about it," Mickey responded with a smile, while enjoying the family atmosphere. "Yes, at first, then he started to complain because the baby wouldn't stop crying and it was only 3 in the morning, ha ha ha." Goro laughed after remembering how his son cried when he was a baby. Luckily for both of them, the brown-haired boy only he cried when they were already up. In his despair, he asked me what I did when he cried, and I gave him a unique technique. "Oh, you're talking about that technique I used to do to make little Issei stop crying." With some melancholy, the brunette remembers, and the days she spent with the little one, everything was nice except the part where he didn't leave my breasts. She thought the last thing, looking at her son who wasn't paying attention to what the two of them were talking about. "Well, we just have to wait and see if my technique works or not, but I'm 100% sure that no baby can hold up." Goro proudly beats his chest and continues with his meal with his wife and son, who didn't pay attention to anything the elders said. End of memory. "I guess that may or may not work," thought the Hyoudou, who very carefully took his son in his arms, who was already showing signs of being about to cry. "Please work," he begged before making a comical face and speaking in another tone of voice. "Hoo, come on baby, here's daddy to give you a nice sleep." Bew, swallowing his pride, the brown-haired boy makes faces to calm his son's pain. Come on, sleep well or daddy will be very sad." Fufu. When he least expected it, the brown-haired boy saw how his son's face began to calm down, and what he would see as a small smile formed on his face before going back to sleep in a deep sleep in which he was before. With a sigh, the brown-haired boy lays Kurenai back on the bed and claps his hands to signal that everything will be okay. "Keep sleeping, Kurenai. Daddy will make sure to give you a happy childhood and will always put an end to scary men." The baby continued sleeping, despite not understanding his father's words. Deep down, something told him that everything was going well and that his father would always be there to protect him from all evil. Without the Hyoudou realizing it, a person was a spectator of everything the brown-haired boy did, from the grimaces to the sweet words that came out of him. Without a doubt, there was no regret in his choice, and he was never going to change his mind. "I see someone is being a good father so early." Akeno finally opened her eyes and stopped pretending to be asleep to join the beautiful family scene. "You were awake the whole time, right?" The brown-haired boy looked at her with an accusatory tone at the action of the brunette, who only let out a giggle. Fu, era, can't I be a spectator of your moments being a father?" She asked another question, and the brown-haired boy just pouted. "Mu Akeno Mala," said the brown-haired boy before being kissed by the female, who now paid attention to her baby. "I still can't believe it," she said while carrying her son's face with great affection. "Those 9 months passed very quickly. I thought I was the only one who thought that." The brown-haired boy laughed, also looking at his son. "If I'm honest, I was terrified when the qualifying game happened." "You're not the only one. I had to give up before that attack from Yubalina hit me full on. I know very well that because of me we were at a disadvantage." But Akeno didn't finish speaking when Issei interrupted her. "Don't blame yourself for anything. It was obviously too dangerous, and even more so in your condition." With a serious tone, the brown-haired boy spoke. "But we both know that this isn't over yet, right?" "I know," she said somewhat sadly. "We have to tell the truth to everyone. We can't hide it anymore." Akeno was about to get up, but Kurenai started making movements and sounds with her mouth as a sign of being upset. Era. I think someone wants us to stay like this for a little longer. With a smile, the brown-haired boy covers himself again and gets closer to his son. It's still a little early. Do you want this moment to last a little longer? I would love to, she said, nodding the same as Issei. And so both now fathers snuggled up with their son in the middle and went back to sleep like a happy family, knowing that they had to talk to certain people and that moments would not be so pleasant. Preferred they to keep that nice moment a little longer before the bad time they were about to go through. Elsewhere in the Gremry mansion. In a certain room, a redhead wakes up from her sleep, or else the short sleep she had. Her eyes were red and with somewhat visible dark circles due to the result of not sleeping almost at night. Without further ado, the redhead lazily got out of bed and went to her bathroom, which was nearby. Trying to distract herself, the Gremry stays under the shower for a while, wanting to forget for a moment the events of last night. But her mind was treacherous and played against her, causing the Gremry's eyes to close tightly while tears fell from her face. It's not every day that you find out that your best friend, the same friend with whom you shared friendship for years, had just become the mother of the same boy that she had fallen in love with. Even though it was the short time that they lived together, that short time was enough for her to fall in love with him, and when she saw him fight for her, that love grew bigger. But when she found out about the secret that the same boy she loved came to light, everything fell apart for her, not literally but emotionally, and here she was now crying in the shower for that truth that hurt her emotionally. But it was no time for regrets, or well, a little bit, yes. Without further ado, Rias finished bathing and getting ready in the classic Academy uniform that she and her entourage mostly used. The answers they were looking for were in the hands of her queen, but determined to get them, even if it hurts, she needed to know the whole story. Before she could go out into a hallway, her door was opened, revealing the wife of the current Lucifer, Grafia, who calmly looked at the redhead and spoke. Rias-sama, good morning, breakfast is served. Please accompany me to the table. Your family and servants are waiting for you. The last thing tensed the Gremry a little. She had gathered courage to face her two servants, but with those words coming out of the mouth of her Wani-sama, they sent everything to hell. Yes, I'm coming, Wani-sama, with the useless attempt of not falling back into that well. Rias, with tension in her body, went through the door and walked down the hall without seeing Grafia's tired sigh. This day will not be calm at all, thought the silver-haired girl as she walked behind Rias. In the dining room of the mansion, the lord and lady of the Gremry house were gathered together with the servants of one of their sons, or rather only daughter. The atmosphere was somewhat tense. Not every day you are gathered with the parents of your king, which was a big surprise for the brown-haired boy when both lords of the house appeared before him, and of course there was no lack of gratitude from the mother of his king for saving her from that arranged marriage where the Lord Gremry ended up sleeping outside, for making that decision without the opinion of the three women of the family. Another surprise for the brown-haired boy was learning about Surzek's son Milica's Gremry, who was also at the table with his father. The way the brown-haired boy looked at the boy told him that he didn't always have the time to see his father, and it was understandable. His father was someone with many responsibilities as a leader, and was important to the demonic world where he now lived. Although the brown-haired boy wonders if once he continues to rise in position he will perhaps have time to spend with his son, this new concern made the brown-haired boy think deeply about the subject, and that was noticed by his girlfriend, who had the baby in her arms, and the aforementioned, for a little attention, began to do what every baby does to get everyone's attention: cry. Sobs. Wah wah. Kurenai would start crying, alerting both parents who were next to each other, and also alerting everyone present who was watching them. No, no, Kurenai, what's wrong, baby? Akeno worriedly rocked the baby in her arms. But the baby just kept crying. How strange, I already fed you and burped you, she said before the light went on, and she turned to look at her man. What's wrong? Surprised by his girlfriend's sudden look, Akeno quickly put Kurenai in the brown-haired boy's arms, taking the aforementioned by surprise. Now it was his turn to calm Kurenai, who wouldn't stop crying until Akeno suggested something to him. Era dear, why don't you use that technique that you used before? It seems that Kurenai likes it, she said, making the brown-haired boy look at her nervously. It was one thing to do it in private and another to do it in front of everyone, but looking at the curious faces of everyone present, added to the sweet smile of his girlfriend, he had no choice but to take advantage of his pride once again and start to calm your baby. Taking some bread and cutlery from the table with his only available hand, the brown-haired boy created two horns made of bread next to the cutlery, and put them on his head, followed by making a funny face along with a high-pitched tone of voice. Look, look, baby, I'm Chopper the reindeer doctor, and another face came to light. Silence fell on the table on his companion's side. It was a moment of shock with the exception of Akeno, who had already seen one of their faces, and on the Gremmery's side it was the same with the exception of the youngest of them, who upon seeing the brown-haired boy's face couldn't stand it any longer, and started laughing. Ha 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 were Milika's laughter, which was followed by Kurenai's laughter, who took a few seconds before starting to laugh. Seeing that, the brown-haired boy continued with his paper and got up from the table to lightly spin around with his son while he spoke to him with that somewhat high-pitched voice that came from his throat. Kaneko, who was the third youngest in the group, couldn't help it, and a giggle was heard coming out of her mouth, leaving the club members surprised how many times they could see Kaneko laugh at antics like that. Well, almost never, and the laughter was contagious. Kiba was the next to laugh, followed by Surzex, and the aforementioned parents also joined in the laughter, completely changing the cold atmosphere that was once present. The servants had also gathered at the time of laughter, and the brown-haired boy was quite happy with his achievement apart from encouraging his son, who was now laughing with great emotion in his father's arms. But as they say, not everything good lasts forever, and this scenario was no exception. The two doors that led to the hallway opened forcefully, drawing the attention of those present who were looking in that direction, noticing the arrival of Rias along with Grafia, who was behind her. With a simple nod he sent a clear message to the other servants to withdraw. With that message received, the servants left the room with the only remaining ones. Rias walked slowly, tensing in the process a certain duo that were the couple, the horns made of bread from the chestnut tree next to the face that Issei had, to the disgust of his son, who looked at the Gremmery for the first time. Note, to clarify, Kurenai can open her eyes, but in previous scenes she was tired and that's why she didn't open them. Rias's steps stopped for a few seconds near the brunette, who still had Kurenai in her arms along with her nerves that fell along with the seas of sweat. The brunette gathered her courage and welcomed. Well, good morning, Bucho, he said, and the Gremmery just looked at him in silence before speaking. Good morning, Hyoudou, she said before walking over to the side and sitting next to the rest. The brown-haired boy just did it, and without noticing it, Karina did it too. Only not knowing how to do it, she just puffed out her cheeks and then let the air out. This is going to be a pretty heavy morning, the brown-haired boy told himself before going and sitting next to his girlfriend, who had Rias in front of her, who kept looking at her fiercely. And so the morning begins for this lovely couple with their first child, and who knows, maybe not their only one. Chapter 2. History of the Past. In the Gremmery mansion, breakfast time was taking place, the most important meal of the day, where you could see the Gremmery patriarchs with their two children and guests, who each enjoyed their breakfast in silence, along with a somewhat uncomfortable atmosphere for everyone, and more so for a certain brown-haired boy who was sitting next to his partner and son, and on the other side was his king Rias Gremmery, who was silently eating breakfast and kept sending sharp glances to the unfortunate brown-haired boy, who could only bitterly eat his breakfast. After a hard 30 minutes, breakfast was over and the plates and cutlery were removed by the servants, who did not hesitate to flee once they had collected what they came for. Taking advantage of that, the brown-haired boy was about to stand up to leave, but with a tug of his sleeve he would leave him back in his place at the table, and Rias' sharp gaze left him stunned. Well, Hyoudou, don't you think it's time to tell us a certain detail, or am I wrong, Akeno? Rias looked at her pawn and Reina, who didn't say anything at what the redhead said. It was obvious that she would not give them the easy way out, so the brown-haired boy just sighed, and before everyone's gaze he looked at Rias in the eyes and spoke. What do you want to know, Bucho? Accepting his destiny, the brown-haired boy faced his king. I want you to tell me how it happened, their relationship, how long they have known each other, and when the baby thing happened. Rias wanted the truth, and only the truth, without exceptions of anything. Sigh. Well, I guess you have the right to know, the brown-haired boy calmly prepared to tell his love story. It all started 10 years ago. History of the Past. Narration by Hyoudou Issei. It all started 10 years ago. I was a lonely boy since my only friend Shide had moved to another country because his father had a breakdown at work, which led him to finish up moving. After that I spent the next few days alone without having the chance to make new friends because of my reputation as a good, naughty boy. You didn't mean, perverted boy, Issei-senpai Kaneko, who was listening to the story, interrupted her senpai, who fell face first against the table. Kaneko, the brown-haired boy, complained, feeling outrageous even though it was the absolute truth. The only result of this was that his son began to laugh at his father's suffering with great joy. Kaneko, don't interrupt Hyoudou. Rias spoke seriously, and her tone sounded more like an order than a request. Getting to the point where Kaneko lowered her head a little, her mood dropped a little after being scolded by her master. Obviously that was not well received by those present, especially by the Gremry fathers when they saw the behavior of their second daughter towards one of their servants who only wanted to comment on something funny. The brown-haired boy looked at everything and decided to continue with the story of his past, and maybe after that he would have a private talk with his king about that little event of the moment. I'd better continue with the story. The chestnut spoke so that everyone would turn their attention to him to continue with the story. When I realized that I couldn't make other friends, I decided to explore my surroundings instead. Every time my mother sent me to play outside so I wouldn't have to spend every day in my room, I was more likely to wander around here and there, playing at being an explorer. Until one of my many walks of the day I saw a huge staircase that led to a temple at the top. Of course, at first I saw it as a challenge. Climbing so many stairs was going to be easy, or so I thought before. When I was halfway to the top, I ran out of energy being halfway, and by pure miracle I had reached the top. When I finally caught my breath, I stood up to admire my surroundings, seeing the great temple of the place, the flowers that were well planted, and the whole place in perfect condition. But there was something that caught my interest the most, and made me look in that direction, and it was at that very moment that time itself stopped before my eyes, because in that single moment I only had eyes to see beautiful amethyst-colored orbs along with beautiful, silky black hair. And that's how I, a dragon, met a beautiful fallen angel from heaven itself. End of Issei Hyoudou's narration. After the brown-haired boy told how he had met Rias' queen, that is, Akeno, there were different reactions from the spectators. From his companions like Kiva and Kaneko, it was a short story, quite beautiful, as if from a tale, or a love story taken. In the case of the older ones like Cerzex, Graphia, Zeoticus and Venilana, it was like a love story that was as sweet as honey, adding to the tone in which the chestnut was said, making it look pure. And in the case of the minors like Milikas and Karinai, they just didn't quite understand, but still felt the vibe that it was something beautiful. But of course there was only one exception to the reactions, and that person was Rias, who, due to her jealousy, repelled all traces of sweetness from the story. That's a nice story, but that's not enough. What else happened in his past? Leaving behind the sarcastic comment, Rias wanted to know more in detail about the past of her recent pawn and her queen. In this case the boy's cheeks heated up a little because he knew what the next part was, and looking at his partner, who just agreed in response because she knew well what was going to be told next at that table. Well, I think it's my turn to continue with the story, but before that, could the children please leave? Akeno, still keeping her usual smile, sent a light request that unfortunately was not accepted. No was the only thing said by Rias that elicited a sigh from the parents and brothers. I don't want to keep listening to other Milikas, not knowing what he was getting into, refused to leave the place because the story caught his attention. I won't leave. Next was Kaneko, who, as usual, refused to be neutral. Akeno, seeing that her efforts to prevent the minors from losing their innocence, ended up resigning herself, and with a light cough to clear her voice, continued with the love story. Narrated by Akeno Himejima. When I first saw Issei, I didn't know how to react. Due to the time I spent in the temple, I was forbidden to leave the grounds of my home by order of my father, who prevented me from making friends with other children my age. But when I first saw Issei, I was in a state of shock and amazement. So much was my impression that I didn't know how to react. No one came to the temple, which made it almost impossible for any human or supernatural being to come to my house, but there he was, who, like me, didn't know how to react when seeing a new, unknown face. When my mind disconnected, my body moved from me, and the only reason for it to move was to run. Wait, are you telling me that you're running away from him because you didn't know how to react to someone you don't know? Rias literally didn't believe it. Her best friend had just revealed something to her that even she didn't see coming. Just like Rias, no one believed it, but if you think about it a little, it made sense after all. The girl was a child just like the brown-haired boy at that time. I can continue telling the story. Rias Akeno, who wanted to avoid the embarrassment of remembering the first impression she gave to her beloved brown-haired boy. Rias just snorted and let him continue with the story. As I continued running, Issei opted more to try to catch up with me so he could catch me and talk, although it didn't end as I expected. After all, we both tripped and fell into that little pond at my house, after running around my house like 4 times, of course. We were both taken by my mother to the bathroom to take a shower, where at least there we could be a little more open and talk. When we came out of the bathroom, our conversations were as if we were friends, and that made me happy to know that I was able to make a friend for the first time. After a few years, after that tragedy, I continued talking to Issei until the current time where we are now. Akeno finished her story of how she met her beloved, which satisfied the curiosity of those present, except for a certain red-haired girl. Although in a certain part the word tragedy sounded painful because of Himejima's voice, and that case was only known by a certain brown-haired boy as well as 2 certain redheads along with a silver-haired girl. But returning to the main topic. Fine, but that doesn't explain how you ended up having a baby. Akeno. Rias, still not satisfied, said something that only elicited a sigh from the raven-haired girl. Akeno just gave her son to Issei and letting out another sigh continued with the extra part of the story, extra that she preferred not to talk about with the children present and older adults. But unfortunately Rias was not going to allow it, so it didn't matter. After all this, she had to say it at some point. As time went by, Issei and I didn't get any closer to the point where we would run away from my house just to go to a small forest that was in the city. It had a lake and enough trees surrounding it so that no one would bother us. We always spent time in that place, just the 2 of us, and we always played different games. But that day we decided to play a slightly more intimate game. Akeno, tell me something. Do you know that game that adults play at night? Those were the words of my Issei, and when I saw that innocence in his words, I could swear that something broke inside me, as if a lock broke in his struggle to subdue something inside me. I couldn't help but smile at his words and let out whatever was inside me. Yes, I know that game, Issei-kun. My parents play it every night when I go to sleep. Seriously, could you teach me how to play? Even though we were children, I couldn't help but taste it. My lips and my head couldn't stop imagining things that a girl shouldn't imagine. Sure, but first we have to play house, Issei-kun. Why? Because you can only play with the person you love, and I wouldn't like to play like that without the person I love by my side. That makes sense to me. Then I'll be the daddy and you'll be the mommy. Good, that means we are a fake couple, so why don't we start? Yeah. And that's how it all ended, where in that same place my beloved Issei and I became one for all eternity, the same place where I became a woman and Issei became a man. After finishing telling a part of the extra story, those present reacted in different ways, leaving the feeling of surprise present, but with different reactions, of course. In Rias' case, she was literally in shock. Her childhood friend from a long time ago was not a virgin, adding the fact of having an affair behind her back. The more she thought she knew her best friend, the more she realized the opposite. In the case of Kiva and Kaneko, their surprise did not last long, adding that the most obvious evidence was the baby laughing in his father's arms, which explained that in order to have a blessing, 100 or perhaps 1,000 snooze sessions were required to achieve what they had been blessed with. As for the older ones, Zeoticus just laughed at his daughter's face while Venelana just shook her head, of course without avoiding letting out a giggle at the fun she was having from her daughter's curiosity. Serzex just rested his arms on the table and shook his head with a smile, believing that the first thing the brunette said was enough, but his little sister, being stubborn, ended up receiving the extra that no one, or at least on his part, was interested in. In Graphia's case, she only focused on covering her only son's ears. Because she still wanted to keep her son innocent and kind, she was not in the mood to have a curious and perverted son, for the marriage with her irresponsible husband was enough for her. Unfortunately for everyone, Akeno did not end there. It is more continuous with the extra of the story, which unfortunately everyone heard. Every detail of the love life of both young people was heard by those present, which is why some were quite surprised by the whole catalogue that Himejima told them. Every day, birthdays, Christmas, etc. On none of those days did the young couple stop doing it. Even when the brunette lost her beloved mother, she herself went to the chestnut to be consoled. But thanks to her support, and her new life as a demon, she was able to live knowing that at least her mother will continue to accompany her in the afterlife. Although that did not stop the woman from continuing to tell her sexual adventures with her boyfriend, the next thing she told was the places where they did it. The first times were in the city parks, the second the entire Issei house including her parents' room, the same school where they went, the classrooms, the pool, library, the director's room, the student council, and finally the occult club where in Akeno's own words she baptized every object that was in the room. At that moment Kaneko opened her eyes wide, remembering that she left her favorite sweets on the club table, which when she tried them they had a different taste, and she still ate them. At that moment the white-haired girl regretted having eaten them. Kiva on the other hand was grateful that he mostly preferred to stand, otherwise he would have touched something that he wouldn't even like to touch. And Rias, the idea of burning down the entire building was a rather tempting idea, after all it was hers. But remembering a certain bishop in a pencil skirt, she discarded that idea and hardened the story a little longer. After all, she was the only one to blame for this. Already reaching a certain point, Himejima stopped for a while to drink something and quench her thirst, letting her little dragon tell the final part of the story, and that part involves the little creature in her arms. After about 4 weeks, Akeno was somewhat distant from me, something that worried me a lot and made me think that it was my fault. Where I arrived by surprise that day to her house and found her there on her knees with her gaze on the floor next to a river of tears running down her eyes. I got scared and approached her to help her and see if she was hurt or not, but there was no damage. There was only her and an empty box accompanied by a pregnancy test that was positive. It was then that I understood why she was so distant with me. I hated myself at that moment for taking so long to realize the situation. Seeing her like that hurt me and I couldn't stand it. I decided to hug her and comfort her. She just sobbed and apologized to me for this, for seeing her like this and for making me feel guilty about this situation. I didn't allow that thought to take its course. Akeno. I called her, to which she looked at me, still letting her tears fall to the floor. What do you want to do with this baby? I know I should be delicate in this situation, but I just went straight to an answer. Even though I was in that state, I wanted her to be honest with me. I just saw her there motionless, thinking of a response, or what she could say before all this. After all, it was her decision, and whatever that decision is, I will support her. I just saw her put her hands on her belly, and between sobs she gave me her answer. I want to have it. I want to have this baby, Issei-kun. Then stop tormenting yourself and let's start this new stage together, Akeno. I hugged her once more to give her my warmth, and with that goal in mind I would make sure to be strong enough to protect them no matter what happens. And that would be the whole story. 9 months later, and here we are now. The brown-haired boy finished speaking in front of his audience, who was silent. I think that it was very manly what Brother Issei did. Oto-san Milikas, who was no longer a prisoner of his mother's hands, spoke with admiration directed at the brown-haired boy. The feeling is mutual, my son. Those kinds of decisions are not light, especially if it involves being parents at a fairly young age. Followed by Milikas, Surzek spoke with respect directed at the brown-haired boy, who only scratched the back of his head out of embarrassment. It's not every day that the devil praises you. Well, before you leave, I would like to chat a little with you, Akeno, about the methods you can use to raise your son well. Of course, if you are interested. Venelana got up from her seat to approach the brunette and give her proposal. Sure, I'd love to, just like that. The brunette Akeno stood up, took her son from her father's arms and, without further ado, left with the bail. Ziaticus along with Surzek also went with the brown-haired boy to give him some of their knowledge about being a good father, while the others took different paths. Leaving a certain Rias alone, who simply clenched her fists due to being literally ignored, after demanding an explanation about the relationship of her 2 entourage companions. Without saying anything else, the Gremry just left the place to go to her room and think about what she would do with her life next. Thus ending breakfast time. Chapter 3. Complications. I still think it's too soon for this. A nervous brown-haired man with hazel eyes stood in front of the door of his home, while behind him was his current girlfriend and mother of his first child. Why don't you stop looking for excuses and knock on the door once and for all? Anada, we've been here for more than 15 minutes and Kurenai is falling asleep. Akeno Himejima, current girlfriend of Issei Hyoudou, was carrying her first son in her arms, who were wearing an adorable panda bear pajama, who also, as Himejima said, the child seemed about to fall asleep in his mother's arms. Already spending the last day in the underworld, the Gremry group said goodbye to the Gremry house to leave, heading back to Kote to continue with their days as academy students. But before leaving, the Gremry patriarchs gave the current couple, now parents, a host of gifts in celebration of the birth of their first child, wishing them the best and more. Of course, that scene did not please a certain redhead at all, who only showed a bitter face, continuing on her way and eliciting many heavy sighs from the rest of her group and her brother, who was present there with his wife and son to say goodbye to them. And without any further delay, Rias Gremry's entourage returned to the city of Kote to continue their daily life. On the way back, the current couple was happy to see that they were officially a family, and of course Kiva was also there to congratulate them, although at that moment Himejima had an idea that could be said in her words that it was a brilliant idea. Flash back to the time of the dimensional train. Do you want to hold him for a moment, Kiva? Akeno offered her son to the Gremry knight, who was hesitant about the idea. Are you sure? I don't want to bother him, Kiva replied, not knowing how to respond. Nonsense, look, it seems that he also wants to be in his uncle's arms. The aforementioned only laughed somewhat nervously when he saw that he was now an uncle, but when he saw the baby extend his hand to be carried, Kiva, without any choice, just accepted and carried his now nephew. Now holding the baby in her arms, Kiva couldn't help but feel a warm sensation in her chest as she watched the baby's tenderness just tugging at her curious face as she looked at the little prince. It seems that he likes you, Kiva, the brown-haired boy commented amused when he saw his son pulling his friend's cheeks. I already noticed it, Kiva commented, unable to prevent the minor from playing with her cheeks. Can I carry it? A fourth presence appeared behind the knight, and that person was Kaneko, who, as usual, was eating some sweets. Of course, Kaneko-san, I don't see the problem. The brown-haired boy freed the knight from his suffering, who only rubbed his cheeks while the brown-haired boy put Kurenai in the arms of the Gremry Tower. Kaneko showed no expression when she held the baby in her arms, and the aforementioned did not seem to pay attention to her, but rather something that she was missing. With his gaze, the baby looked at the young woman's bust and touched it with his hand. Then he looked at his mother's bust and again at Kaneko's, again at Akeno's and again at Kaneko's. She looked up, exchanging glances with the tower, and just by looking into her eyes she sent the message she wanted to say, causing annoyance in the white-haired girl, and the result was an upset Kaneko returning a baby to the arms of her mother. It's obvious that he's your son, Issei-senpai, that was all Kaneko said before leaving in a bad mood, eliciting a nervous laugh from the brown-haired boy and a light laugh from the dark-haired mother. And of course adding a snort from a jealous Rias, who couldn't stop looking at him with some anger. Kurenai, I understand that you have that obsession with breasts like your father, but be more discreet with your disappointment, darling. Akeno spoke to him as if she was waiting for the baby to understand her, and the aforementioned only touched her mother's breasts. Era, what a pain you came out of me. Leave it, Akeno. He's just a baby who enjoys his moment before he grows up, the brown-haired boy commented amusingly while giving his maraca to his son and a loving kiss to his partner. We must be more responsible now that we have this great responsibility, or not? Of course, but that doesn't mean you stop being yourself, Anata. After all, I fell in love with you and your whole being. Himejima's sincere words warmed the chestnut's heart, who in response attracted his partner in a warm hug. You tell me nice things because you want me to pamper you, right? That question earned a giggle from the brunette. Well, I'm your girlfriend and the mother of your first child. I don't see the problem in asking my future husband to spoil me, or do I? Akeno answered with another question and, like the previous one, she got a laugh from the brown-haired boy. I see no flaws in that logic, so I see no problem in pampering you. With that said and done, the two had a round of kisses while their son fell asleep in his mother's arms. All being seen by a jealous redhead who with each passing second destroyed more and more the cover of the pillow where the armrest was. Adding to that, she did not stop giving off the well-known aura of the power of destruction of her family, earning the fear of the rest of the Gremry group who, to avoid the storm, sat in a secluded place so as not to suffer external damage from the hurricane that was generated around Rias. Kiva-senpai, do you think this will end soon? Even though Kaneko didn't show it, the truth is that she felt somewhat uncomfortable because of the tension in the environment, and that feeling was shared by the knight. To be honest, I doubt if this is something more personal for Butcho, and let's say those two are more busy with their own thing than the elephant in the room. Kiva's response led Kaneko to look at the couple once more, and then at her president, letting out a tired sigh, knowing that this wouldn't be as easy as she thought. Meanwhile, the kissing session had come to an end, and both of them collided, their foreheads continuing with their display of affection. Akeno took Kurenai and carefully laid him down in the portable bassinet that was one of the many gifts from Rias's parents. Note: just in case, I clarify that the name, Portable Moses, refers to a portable crib, but that's how it appears in my Google search. End of note. Once the baby stopped feeling the warmth of his mother, his little face contracted in sadness, moving his hands in an attempt to touch what he was fervently looking for. A look at him. Akeno was enchanted by her son's actions. Literally every action her child did was adorable in the eyes of his loving parents. Calm down, Kurenai, mom has something special for you. From among the pile of things, Akeno took out a special stuffed animal that caught the brown-haired boy's attention. A small Issei stuffed animal was placed in the baby's arms, who upon feeling it relaxed and placed his little hands on said stuffed animal before going to sleep again. Isn't it cute? Akeno looked at the brown-haired boy, who just agreed. Where did you get a stuffed animal with my face? Issei had his doubts, not knowing the original whereabouts of the stuffed animal, and Akeno just gave him a little smile. Is that it? Don't take it so seriously. Let's change to a much more interesting topic. Even though the brown-haired boy wanted an answer, he knew that his girlfriend wasn't going to give them to him, so he just decided and changed the subject. How about today we introduce Kurenai to your parents, Anada? At that question, the brown-haired boy was finally aware of the greatest detail of his life, and the detail was the simple fact that at no time in his life, the brown-haired boy commented anything about his love or private life to his parents, and now that he was a father, Issei Hyoudou could feel how his own will was digging his grave. Are you sure? I mean, I think we should at least wait a little bit because, well, you know, the brown-haired boy tried to find an escape route, but remembering that he was stupid, he couldn't find a way out of the current situation. On Akeno's part, she knew how to convince her lover. After all, they have known each other for 10 years. So without further ado, Akeno, like the good actress she is, put on a sad look, lowered her gaze slightly and let her eyes crystallize a little, and then spoke. What's wrong, Anada? Don't you want our baby to meet his grandfather? With a false tone of pain, Akeno spoke, and the brown-haired boy's heart stopped for a second at that result. I have it, she thought victoriously. Although Akeno did not tell anything about Issei's part, and that led the brown-haired boy to sigh, knowing perfectly well his girlfriend's move after all they had known each other for 10 years. It's clear that she's trying to trick me. She's played that trick on me so many times that I already know perfectly well when she's lying and when she's telling me the truth. The brown-haired boy knew that once Akeno sets her mind to something, there's no one who can stop her, and that includes him. Unfortunately, even though I know it's a lie, it still hurts me when she puts on those eyes. Surrendered, the brown-haired boy only gives in, giving the green light to Akeno's idea, and the aforementioned, in a state of celebration, pounced on her man to claim his lips in a victory kiss that turned into a hot kiss when both of their tongues entered the game. And so they continued for the little time that remained of their journey until the last train station. End of flashback. Back in the present, the brown-haired warrior surrendered, lowered his head in defeat, and without further ado knocked on the door of his home. In just a second his call was answered when the main entrance door opened, revealing a brown-haired girl who expressed doubts upon seeing who was knocking on the door. Why are you knocking on the door instead of coming in? Did something happen? Miki Hyoudou, Issei Hyoudu's mother, looked at her son, who couldn't look her in the eyes because of his nerves. Oka-san, well, you'll see, there's something I have to tell you. The brown-haired boy was about to speak, but his mother got ahead of him. Are you selling drugs? She asked, arms crossed and her gaze slightly wrinkled in annoyance. What? No, of course not, the teenager denied. Did you stay someone at school? Another question came out of his mother's mouth. Of course not, Oka-san. The brown-haired boy's patience was reaching its limit. Did you get someone pregnant? And another question came out. Oh no, wait, I doubt that last one. That was the last comment that ended the patience of the brown-haired boy, who pulled his hair out of anger. while behind was Akeno covering her mouth to avoid letting out a laugh, adding to the fact that Kurenai was already awake just to enjoy her father's suffering. He was undoubtedly the son of Akeno Himejima herself. Oka-san, the boy raised his voice to get his mother's attention, who fell silent at the outburst of her son. Can you let me speak, please? He put both hands together, begging for his chance to speak. Okay, son, tell me what's wrong, and if you raise your voice again I'll hit you with my slipper just like when I was a kid. With that warning, the brown-haired boy calmed down, cleared his throat, and thought about what he was going to say next. Well, what happens is that there is someone I have to introduce you to. With all the courage he could muster, the brown-haired boy gave a serious look, allowing the importance of the matter to be demonstrated. Does your father have to be part of this, darling? Mickey's question was answered with a yes by the brown-haired boy. Odo-san, come to the door for a moment. Mickey's call reached the living room where a man was resting with his newspaper in his hand. He was about 40 years old, and just by listening to his wife, the man stopped reading and went to the entrance of the house, finding his wife and son there. What's going on, darlings? Did our son get someone pregnant? The question made his son fall backwards comically, earning a laugh from his wife. Ha ha ha, that's a good one, honey. But we're talking about our son. It would be a miracle if that happened. That comment continued to play with the patience of his son, who was red with anger, and his father's laughter only made everything worse. It's true, dear. Ha ha ha. Okay. The idea of revealing everything at once was very tempting for the younger brown-haired boy, but he held back and resisted. But leaving that aside, what do you have to tell us, son? We're all ears, watching and making sure his mother doesn't leave another comment that breaks what's left of the chestnut tree's wall. Issei finally spoke. Well, what I wanted to tell you is that I would like you to meet someone very, very important to me. Taking a few steps back, the brown-haired boy extended his hand, taking someone else's hand, being watched by his parents, who were spectators of their son's actions. The chestnut returned to the front of them, holding the hand of a young man a year older than him, and who in the other arm of said woman held a beautiful baby who looked at them fixedly as if he were analyzing them. The Hyoudou lords were astonished even though they didn't say it. Their faces reflected their surprise at seeing the person their son brought. The Hyoudou lords weren't stupid, and just by looking at them they could get the answer their son gave them with their actions. The brown-haired boy looked back at the front, but not before giving his partner and his child a smile. Knowing what was coming next, Issei said everything he had to say without any hint of fear in his eyes. Oka-san, Odo-san, I want to introduce you to my partner and future wife Akeno Himejima. With the introduction of her partner, Akeno bowed in respect towards her future in-laws without erasing that smile that characterized her, and also taking the baby in her arms. I want to introduce you to my son, who is also her grandson, Kurenai Himejima/Hyoudou. Ba was the comment of the baby, who took his fingers out of his mouth to make a movement similar to a greeting in front of his grandparents, who did not say a word. Going from amazement to shock would be too much for the hearts of the adult duo, who were left like wheels in front of their son, daughter-in-law and grandson, who continued to touch their fingers when he lost interest in his grandparents. The seconds were eternal, and the brown-haired boy became anxious about the result. His parents did not move from their place, and his concern only increased with each second that became a minute. But his torment ended when his mother made the first move after 5 minutes that passed still. The brown-haired boy didn't know exactly what happened, but in just a blink of an eye his mother had her son in her arms, adding that his father cut off all the distance they had and shortly after gave him a mega punch that knocked all the air out of the brown-haired boy and knocked some saliva out of his mouth. Ak was the only thing he could say before falling to his knees, holding his stomach. Faced with this action, Akeno was about to attack to defend her beloved, but that idea was erased from her mind when she saw the Hyoudou celebrating with her grandson in their arms. The scene was confusing for Himejima, but if she thought about it carefully it was clear that the Hyoudou did not seem to have a problem with the fact that their son was a father at the age of 17. But surely the shock was more because of the bad decision their son made, or maybe they were just upset to see that their son kept this secret from them for almost 10 years. But leaving that aside and looking at the most important thing, it seemed that her in-laws accepted her and her Kurenai without any problem. What a joy! At last our prayers were heard. My master's Gora held the baby in the air with his arms in the air, who only laughed at the amused action. I know, my love, it is a miracle of the Guadalupe rose that our perverted son brought us to grandson, and I thought he would die alone. Mickey wiped his tears with a handkerchief. But they were not tears of sadness but of happiness. Wait, what do you mean, alone? Issei recovered from the blow and stood up with the help of Akeno, who was holding him. And Virgin Goro added, still playing with Kurenai. And ugly Mickey finished, finally bursting the dam of patience of his son. What kind of parents are you two? The brown-haired boy couldn't help but raise his voice even more, seeming like he was shouting, but that didn't affect Mr. and Mrs. Hyoudou at all. The only ones in our class, they are X2. It was the comment in unison by the two adults, who continued with their thing, leaving an Issei and his spirits on the floor being comforted by his partner. Okay, calm down, Anata, at least look at the positive side of this. The brown-haired boy looked at her, waiting for her to continue. Your parents accepted me as well as our son, and above all you have me. That was true. In just 10 years the brown-haired boy achieved what many other teenagers could not do, have a beautiful childhood friend, have sex with that childhood friend, and end up in a relationship with said person, adding to the fact that they now had a they are with them. That is an achievement that no normal boy could do, and thanks to that reality the brown-haired boy's spirits returned to the top of the mountain. You're right, Akeno, I can't let my parents' comments discourage me, because without a doubt I have the perfect girl as my partner. What Hyoudou said brought a bright smile to the brunette, who claimed her lover's lips as payment for her word. How about we go in, honey? While we were talking, your parents came in with our son? Akeno, without asking, intertwined her fingers with the brown-haired boy's, who corresponds? And in a short time, the two of them entered the Hyoudou family home. Not knowing that in all the time that passed a certain redhead he was watching from his club with the help of his familiar, and let's say that his spirits were not entirely cheerful. Let's just say that where there used to be an old desk, now there was only a pile of dust that used to be a classy desk, and where there used to be a wall, now there was only a hole that let in the daylight. Without a doubt a new problem would come out of all this. But those problems are for the Issei and Akeno of tomorrow, without knowing what tomorrow awaits the two of them. Chapter 4. The calm before tomorrow's storm. Continuing where we left off. After being hit by their father, the young couple entered the Hyoudou home, being unaware of a certain relative of a certain redhead who was not at all happy with what she saw. But leaving that aside, the Hyoudou family gathered in the living room of the house, and at that moment the young and only son of the Hyoudou family explained everything their parents needed to know about their relationship with Akeno, and the story behind their relationship. Starting with the main thing of how they met, how their love relationship was formed, and also, unfortunately for the brown-haired boy, to tell the sexual history he had with Akeno. It was the most uncomfortable time he could spend, and thank goodness his father didn't look at him badly for that. After he told about the birth of his son and other things, leaving secret for the moment the existence of the supernatural world, his death at the hands of Rainier, and his adventures lived in the last days. In time the brown-haired boy will reveal that part of his life to them, but for now he has preferred to concentrate more on the now than on the extra of his story. Hi, that would be all now. Telling their whole story, the Hyoudou gentlemen were silent for a moment, exchanging glances for seconds until Father Hyoudou spoke up. Well, to sum it all up, after your friend Shido moved away a few days later, you met Akeno-san, where over time you became a couple, and after so much unprotected hex, this wonderful creature was born. With a summary from beginning to end, only to smile at the end to see his grandson in his arms. Mr. Hyoudou returned to the topic and looked at his only son Issei. You are aware of your current situation, right? If Oto-san, I am aware of my actions and I do not regret any of them. I only regret letting Akeno play with me without corners on her birthday. That dark memory made him remember the moment where he felt like a woman. I remember that it was marked in his head permanently. Son, like your parents, I must be honest with you. It was Mickey's turn to speak, taking a firm and serious stance like a mother who demands respect. Although we are glad that you have a girlfriend who genuinely loves you, we are also sincerely very happy to know that we have such a beautiful grandson with us. I take a moment to take a breath before continuing. It does not take away the clear feeling of having failed you as parents. That revelation took the two young men by surprise, seeing that their parents didn't seem to have a problem with their relationship, and also seeing that they did accept Kurenai as their grandson. Neither of them expected to hear the boyfriend's mother express herself in that way. I think that if I had explained it to you, or at least tried to educate myself, Maybe this wouldn't have ended like this. Mickey continued with her gaze directed at the floor. Maybe I could have stopped you from following that path of perversion and lust. But I can't do anything now, and I can't help but feel like I failed like your mother. And I failed like your father. It was Gora's turn, who accompanied his wife with the same action of lowering his head and looking at the floor, showing a slight bow to the couple, who were only left speechless by their parents' action. But that did not end there, and young Hyoudou was not willing to see this for a second longer. What nonsense are you two talking about? Issei did not hesitate to raise his voice and also stood up in front of them, which made both parents look at him in surprise, not expecting their son to raise his voice like that. You are the best parents I could have wished for. It is true that my lust ended up leading me to do many stupid things, and that it also led to you being a victim of my pranks. The brown-haired boy clenched his fists in anger. But to say that you failed me, that is never true. It is true that your comments may lower my spirits, and that also the way you see me hurts me in a certain way. But you are always there for me, and even if I don't say it, I am happy to know that you would never turn your back on me. The chestnut approached the two and hugged them with much love. I am grateful to be your son, and I am also grateful that you never gave up on me despite being the very reincarnation of lust. Thank you for everything, Odo-san and Oka-san, leaving the older girl speechless. They both shared the same hug as their son, leaving Kurenai inside a firm hug that generated a warm sensation, leading him to fall asleep as he felt the family love surrounding him, leaving Akeno as a witness to that sweet family moment, leading her to remember for seconds a moment that cruel fate had snatched away from her because of the selfishness of a clan that hated her. She erased that line of thought and stopped thinking about it. She was happy now, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her, not again. After a long time, the Hyoudou finished the hug, wiping away the remains of some tears that were shed along the way. Gora handed his son his grandson, and the attention was now directed to Himejima, who was a mere spectator. Mickey looked at her for a moment before standing up and walking in front of her, making the brunette a little nervous. Your name was Akeno, right, little one? Mickey's question earned a nod from the young woman. Well, I'd better say it bluntly so as not to waste any more time. Are your feelings for Mai completely sincere, or are you just with him out of interest? The question took her by surprise. Akeno blindly thought that her mother-in-law accepted her so easily and that it was a mistake. But that mistake had a solution, which was the answer to that question. Akeno without hesitation stood up and locked eyes with Mrs. Hyoudou, who waited for an answer. Her son wanted to interfere, but Father Hyoudou held him by the shoulder, preventing him from interfering. This was a women's issue, and those issues cannot be interrupted by a man. With all due respect, Mrs. Hyoudou, Mickey Hyoudou, the feelings I have for your son are as genuine as a knight's loyalty to his king. I love your son so much that I would die for him, and show him all my love every second of the day, and let him desecrate me in every way to the point of even baptizing an entire building with my essence combined with his. Akeno paused to take a breath, leaving her man captivated and nervous because it was not necessary to mention the latter even though the entire student council room witnessed that. So to finish, I love your son more than anything in the world, and if he dies I will go to his side no matter who is in my way. As she finished speaking, Akeno gasped at the endlessness of her words, while Mickey just stood there with her arms crossed, listening attentively to her words. The place fell silently, waiting for an answer from Mrs. Hyoudou, who kept her gaze serious until she came in and sketched a smile of joy. It makes me happy to know that my son got a good woman. Those words calmed Issei's heart and made Akeno's heart happy. Please continue to take care of my son as you have done until now, Akeno-chan. Of course, Mickey-sama, Akeno replied with her palms together, making the older woman laugh. Please, no formalities, just call me Mickey or Mama, whatever is more comfortable for you. Mickey didn't know that those words only made Himejima happier than leaving her role as a polite girl, and she rushed to hug her boyfriend's mother and now mother-in-law. Thank you very much, Oka-sama. It was certainly a good time for everyone present in the room. Well, I guess this calls for a celebration, doesn't it seem right to you, family? Goro couldn't help but want to celebrate, and the excitement spread to those present. I don't see why not, let's do it, Akeno agreed, and so did Mickey. Well, if we are equal, it is better to prepare everything for tonight. It was Issei's turn, and with that said and done they began to prepare for a celebration. But just at that moment the brown-haired boy remembered a special person in his life and couldn't help but curse himself for forgetting her. Hey, now that I think about it, where's Asia? The brown-haired boy looked at his parents, who looked at each other for a few seconds until Mickey remembered something. "Oh right, I sent her to go for some errands, and after she came back she went to see Rias-chan. She said that she had something to tell him, but she didn't give me any more information about it." At the end of those words, the brown-haired boy brought his hand to his chin and thought of a possible idea about what that talk would be about. But he better leave it for later. For now, he wanted to take his son to bed to rest. Unaware that an interesting conversation was taking place inside the club, where a certain red-haired heiress and a certain blonde-haired ex were none. Co-Academy Occult Club. Inside the old building of said academy, a certain Rias was seen having a serious talk with an innocent and future not-so-innocent ex-nun named Asia, who showed a not-so-pleasant expression due to the information she was receiving from her king. A few days ago, poor Asia couldn't get her worries about the brunette out of her head, and that led her to be down during those few days. Her discomfort was noticed by the Hyoudou, who tried to ask her about the problem, but Asia only changed her sad look for a smile, saying that nothing was wrong with her. On the same day, Mickey asked her if she could run some errands for her, the same favor that the ex-nun accepted without any problem, in order to forget her low spirits for a while. All being seen by the Hyoudou, who only sighed seeing her beloved daughter fall, and not with that smile that encouraged everyone who saw her. Finishing the errand, Asia was on her way home. She received a call from her king on the phone, which made her happy, which means that if Rias was okay, then her beloved Issei was too. Without wasting time, she returned to the house to drop off the groceries, and without saying anything she ran towards the club. Without noticing that Issei and Akeno were arriving from the other side of the street, due to the excitement, he did not notice the presence of both, and without looking back he continued on his way. Upon arriving at the club, the first thing he did was hug Rias, who hugged him back. Maybe she was going through a moment of jealousy, but she would never reject a hug from her dear little sister. After that moment, Asia asked about the brown-haired boy and also asked about the others. Just at that moment, Rias' face showed her discouragement, as she remembered the reason why she was upset, and taking a seat in her chair she began to recount everything that had happened regarding her wedding. Issei's fight against KFC, and most importantly the revelation of Akeno's pregnancy, and Issei's relationship with the aforementioned. Asia was sitting on the couch holding her head with her hand due to the headache that was generated by receiving a wave of information. She literally never expected a revelation of such magnitude. It was a miracle that she didn't faint at such a revelation about her first friend and first love. At times like this, poor Asia didn't know what to say or do. She was lost, but fortunately for her, Rias' warm hands caught her attention, putting aside her discomfort temporarily. "Are you okay?" Rias asked as she took a seat on the other end of the couch. "Yes, it's just that it's a lot to digest, and it's also a lot to think about." The fallen tone was a clear sign of the bishop's mood, and Rias could notice it. She didn't know what she was thinking. She literally called her, and without hesitation she revealed all the secrets that the brunette and the raven-haired girl told her along with the others. She didn't know what she was thinking when she did it, but even so she didn't feel a great discomfort. It was simply something minimal that didn't change the grammar much, and it didn't change the idea of her plan that involved the nun either. What will happen now, Rias-san? A lost lamb looked for a guide, and that guide was Rias. Well, for now we both know that we can't do anything right now, but that doesn't mean I'm going to give up, and something tells me that you don't want to give up either, right, Asia? Rias noticed Asia's denial, which was for her benefit. Then I want you to be part of my plan. Plan? What kind of plan do you have in mind, Rias-san? For some reason Asia had a bad feeling about this plan that her king had in mind, but due to her current state she was willing to collaborate with whatever it took to erase this pain in her chest. I'm glad to see your collaboration, Asia-chan. Rias looked happy, but that happiness came with thorns. Well, the plan is as follows, and this could put us on the same level as Akeno. Without further ado, Rias told the plan, to the same plan that made her cover her mouth in surprise upon hearing such a plan that could end well, but could also end very badly. But that's for another day. Back to the Hyoudou residence night. After an afternoon of celebration between the adult couple and also the current young couple, the sun retired to make way for the moon, leaving the night. Already over the celebration, the Hyoudou gentleman went to bed, and halfway there, the brown-haired boy approached them carrying a sleeping Kurenai in his arms, asking if they could put him to bed in his crib, and without warning, in a supernatural way. His son, he ended up in the arms of his mother, who said yes without waiting for an answer from her son. In the end, the gentleman, now grandfather, went to the second floor with their grandson, unaware of what had happened. The actions of his parents caused a sigh from Issei and a giggle from Akeno, who finished cleaning the table. You could see from their faces that they were quite excited to have Kurenai in their lives. Akeno landed next to her beloved brown-haired boy, who pulled her towards him with his arm. Yes, to be honest, when Rias arrived it was an unexpected thing. Then it was Asia, who is now her daughter, so to speak, and now here with her first grandson along with her daughter-in-law, they must be in a state of frenzy of happiness. That comment earned him a few kisses from his partner, which he reciprocated, creating a scene of lovebirds in love. The boy's hands ran over every inch of the brunette's body, who enjoyed every touch she received to the point of gently shaking her curves, causing the same boy to look for more and more, touching her entire body to the point of placing both hands on the back mounds of her beloved boyfriend, who bit her lower lip as she felt her boyfriend's hands kneading her perfect ass with desire. "Anata, you are very daring," a whisper directly in the boy's ear only provoked more the desire to possess the couple's body, something that she wanted. Akeno, the brown-haired boy, called her, sealing his lips on the neck of the aforementioned, who moaned at the touch of her partner. "I want you. There are two of us now." Anata Akeno sent her hands to the pelvic area where a certain tool that she fervently desired was waiting for her if it weren't for the doctor's order. "You don't know how much I want to destroy your pelvis." Akeno's words only heated up the brunette's body more and more, to the point that in his desperation he left one of his hands on the brunette's, but to use his free hand and carefully unbutton his shirt. Finished with the last button, the brunette could see that beautiful pair that his girlfriend always carried with her, being held back by a tight black bra with a butterfly pattern that was quite attractive. The brown-haired boy was still not satisfied, even though he had his hand available under the zipper of his pants, letting out his dragon, which began to rub against the soft thigh of his girlfriend, who, like the brown-haired boy, was just as hot as him. Another point of why they were made for each other. Akeno rubbed her now half-naked body against her man's body, who shared the same actions as his female, leading to the two desiring each other. Issei was about to kiss her and start one of his classic +18 scenes, but to his misfortune and annoyance the soft finger of his girlfriend stopped him, the same action that continued with her taking distance from him. "You don't know how much it hurts me to do this to us, Anata, but I can't do it now." Akeno showed guilt on her face. As much as she wanted to feel as if they were split into two, she had to respect the medical order. It was true that they could be cured with magic or with the classic phoenix tear, but Akeno wanted to give birth like any other woman, and that included pain and everything else. On one occasion she talked about the subject with her lover after ingesting her usual supply of potassium from her boyfriend's banana, and he agreed with her partner's decision. A stable relationship remains balanced as long as both sides give their part. These two loved each other so much that they never contradicted each other, and almost never argued. The only exception was when hormones altered Himejima, the same occasion that the brown-haired boy had to watch his words and actions. But in the end everything turned out well, and there was no collateral damage except for one occasion when the brown-haired boy ended up scorched by his partner's lightning due to a misunderstanding. Details could be said. Returning to the current topic, Issei, despite being hot, adding the lustful desire on his part as a dragon, made an effort and contained himself, put his friend back in his pants and fixed his clothes before approaching his girlfriend to give her a warm hug. "Don't feel bad, my love. I respect your decisions and your way of being. I can wait a little longer, so please smile. You know I don't like to see you down." With sincere words, Akeno's mood improved at the same time that she enjoyed her partner's touch. "I keep wondering what I did to deserve you." Akeno moved away a little to see those hazel eyes. "That's what I wonder. What did this perverted beast do to win the heart of such a beautiful belle? In front of my eyes." The brown-haired boy was caught by those beautiful violet eyes. Akeno once again approached his ear to dedicate some sweet words to him. "Let's take a bath together so I can leave you as dry as the Sahara Desert with my mouth." With that said, Akeno ended the hug and walked towards the bathroom. As she did so, she wiggled her hips to create a spark to light the boy's fuse, the same fuse that ignited and exploded when the woman crossed the threshold of the door. As if it were a cartoon, The chestnut howled like a wolf, and without wasting time ran into the bathroom to have a sweet moment as a couple. While at the same time a certain Asia came home and her face looked tired. Without saying anything, Asia went up the stairs to go straight to her room and slept, ignoring the sounds of the bathroom and also the sound of a lullaby. The problems of tomorrow are the problems of tomorrow's Asia who would witness something they have never seen in their life. But that's history for another occasion. Chapter 5. The anger of a father and a mother. Akeno, are you 100% sure this is a good idea? A certain brown-haired boy was nervous at the idea that his beloved girlfriend had, who was carrying her usual school bag and an extra package that was not her well-endowed mounts. Anada, we will not repeat the subject again. Perhaps you are ashamed of your own son. These were Akeno's words as she carried Kurenai, and to emphasize her words she showed a sad face at her partner's words. Of course not, he exclaimed, alarmed at the thought that he had screwed up. I would never feel ashamed of you. You are my joy and happiness. I am very grateful to have you in my life. Then don't argue and walk, dear, or we'll be late. Foo, foo, foo. In the blink of an eye, Akeno's smile returned, and she walked happily with her baby and her beloved partner, who only reflected defeat on his face. But you might wonder how this happened, because to find out we must return an hour before leaving the Hyoudou residence, the new home of Akeno Himejima and Kurenai Himejima Hyoudou. An hour before leaving. The sun could be seen in the distance at sunset, and the sun's rays illuminated the city of Kuo, the same rays that passed through the curtains of the window of the room of the young Hyoudou Issei, who was the victim of the same rays of the sun that reflected in a mirror to go directly to his face, causing him to wake up from his sweet dream to his misfortune. Seriously, the strong desire to want to destroy the sun is more tempting every day, the young man complained, taking out his hand under the sheets to close the curtain of his window. The young man, now awake, explores his room with his eyes, noticing that everything was in order. His desk clean, his things in order, his son's crib next to him with the aforementioned still asleep and his beloved partner asleep next to him, while he masturbates him with his soft hand to the delight of the brown-haired boy. Everything is in order like any normal day in the life of Issei Hyoudou, who, leaving behind so much bullshit, returned to the reality of his life. Akeno, wake up! The young man with his other hand moved the light naked body of his girlfriend, which made the young man want to give his first child to a little brother or sister. Issei, she whispered in her dreams to the joy of the aforementioned, I will leave you just like the Sahara Desert. Those words only turned on the brown-haired boy, who sent reason to hell and went straight to lust. Hi! The brown-haired boy moved his body, still ensuring that Akeno continued with her hand job, staying on top of his partner, who went from being on her side to being face to face with his girlfriend. The brown-haired boy didn't waste time, and he began to kiss and lick the dark-haired girl's neck, who moaned at the contact on her skin. Being careful not to make too much noise so as not to wake Kurenai, the young Hyoudou began to kiss his partner, thus muffling the moans of Akeno herself, who tightened her grip on the brunette's weapon, who only wanted more, and that was what she was going to look for. He carefully lined up the constellations ready to have a morning quickie, but what Kaiba didn't count on was the trap card his son had placed on the field, the same card he activated called Crying. A card that generated a sound wave that nullified his attack and caused a large amount of damage to his opponent. Exodia manifests you. With Kurenai's crying, young Issei came back to his senses, understanding that he lost the opportunity to his misfortune, while Akeno woke up little by the crying of her very own child, who did not hesitate to prioritize leaving her brown-haired boy with the desire. There you go, my little dragon mom will take care of feeding you. Taking her son in her arms, Akeno landed on the corner of the bed and began to feed her offspring in front of the brown-haired boy, who only sighed in defeat, knowing that those treasures of his wife temporarily belonged to his son. Anada, are you jealous of your own son? That question was only to annoy the brown-haired boy himself, who was affected. It's not fair that my girlfriend makes me want it like that and leaves me wanting, was her response, and Akeno could only laugh while the brunette looked away with an annoyed pout. But feeling the contact of his partner's hand on his, Issei couldn't help but intertwine their fingers and erase all traces of annoyance. Will you always be the only one for me, Issei, or do you doubt my love? At the question, the brown-haired man carefully attracts her, leaving the two of them sitting on the edge of the bed, curled up and without any clothing covering them, as if they were Adam and Eve. And you doubt my love? The brown-haired man returned the question to his wife. I would never doubt your feelings, was his answer. Then there is nothing to discuss because I would rather die than betray my heart and feelings. The brown-haired boy kissed her and Akeno reciprocated, all in front of her son, who looked at them as if it were a Netflix series that was quite entertaining for him. They both shared one more moment of lovers as if nothing in the world mattered at that moment between them, but their moment would be interrupted when the door of their room opens, revealing a certain blonde who was also a former nun and current bishop of the Gremry clan. Issei-san, Oka-san says that breakfast is ready. Asia's words slowly died when the nun turned her gaze towards the bed, finding her brunette and senpai sitting there naked and with their baby sucking on his mother's breast. Era, good morning, Asia-chan, Akeno greeted as if nothing strange was happening in the room. Hey Asia, the brown-haired boy also welcomed, covering his flagpole raised by the action with his partner earlier. The breakfast, the ex-nun commented, trying not to faint from grief. Oh sure, give us a moment, we'll see you down there. With those words the nun signed and left, closing the passage door. Under normal circumstances Asia could scream while at the same time taking off her clothes to enter with the brown-haired boy and start an argument with Akeno for Issei's affection, but due to the recent news that both young people were a couple and parents in Asia's mind, she told her that it would be a bad idea to do that. But her heart was against it, as were her feelings for the boy. Much to her disappointment, Asia was realistic and knew that if she came into conflict with Akeno, then her first friend and first love would side with Akeno and not hers, leading to the levels of discouragement only continuing to rise. When Asia reached the bottom of the stairs, she put on her best smile and went to the table where the Hyoudou lords were present, waiting for the arrival of their children, counting Akeno as their third daughter. Asia-chan, how did it go up there? The brunette's mother asked the blonde. You didn't catch him doing things, or did you? At that question, Mrs. Hyoudou stomped on her husband's foot, causing pain to the aforementioned. Itagora complained about his wife's blow. Better go back with your newspaper, dear, maybe with it you can ask such stupid questions, Gora's wife commented bitterly. Yes, dear, said the frightened man of the house, making the nun laugh, who needed a moment like that. Don't worry, Okasama, the two of them will be coming down in a few seconds. After saying that, the footsteps that were heard coming down the stairs were heard, revealing the Wonder Trio and current family to the joy of the older ones. What a joy to finally see my favorite one. Mickey approached the young people where Issei thought his mother was about to hug him, so he extended his arms ready, only to see his mother pass by and take Kurenai in her arms. At that moment something broke inside Issei as well as in Asia when she saw that she was also replaced by a baby. And the only ones who were covered by an aura of fall were only the dragon and the nun, with the only difference that at least the dragon was comforted by his female. Without any more time to waste, the Hyoudou family began their breakfast calmly, where love was in the air, or at least in the air that surrounded Issei and Akeno, because the Himejima was feeding her boyfriend with her chopsticks to the happiness of the boy and the envy of the pouting nun. After a while, breakfast was over and the young parents were already at the entrance door, ready to leave for the academy. Well, we're leaving now, Oka-san, the young man warned his mother. Akeno, we have to go now. Just a moment, Anada. Kurenai doesn't want to let go of my shirt, Akeno replied from the living room next to Mrs. Hyoudou, who was holding her grandson while Akeno tried to get her baby to let go of her. I think he doesn't want you to go, Akeno-chan, Mickey commented, amused by the matter. Era, it seems so. Akeno, while trying to push her son's little hand away, made the only mistake that should not be made, and that was to look directly into the baby's eyes, because if she did she would end up being controlled by her son's tenderness, taking Akeno's mind to infinity and beyond. Issei just stood at the entrance waiting for his girlfriend. Just a few seconds later he heard her footsteps approaching the door, and when she finally came out, Issei was surprised to see his girlfriend with his Kurenai, and an idea came to his head, the same idea that the brown-haired boy was not going to allow. Akeno, no, Issei said before any comment from his girlfriend. Please, Anada, just this time, Akeno begged. No, Akeno, we can't take Kurenai with us. Issei stood firm in his word. Why? Akeno looked upset, and Kurenai just threw her maraca at her father, but it didn't even reach him. First, I doubt they'll let us pass with Kurenai. Second, there's the crazy group of fans that if they see you with Kurenai they'll possibly do something crazy. And third, where are we going to leave it until the break? The points Issei gave were valid, but Akeno, having the heart of a mother, only understood the word no in everything Issei said. Akeno resorted to playing dirty to get what she wanted, like she did every time Issei said no to a request of hers. Akeno's manipulation was so effective with Issei that they made reference to the scene where Deadpool was bucking his girl, including that scene where Issei experimented with being the woman in the relationship. Akeno took off her smart-ass, letting go of her ponytail, closed her eyes, shortened the distance with Issei, and when she opened her eyes, the unfortunate brown-haired boy was surprised to fall into the trap of his beloved girlfriend. Please, Anata, yes? The sad eyes of Puss in Boots, a technique which Issei Hyoudou can't say no to. Through thick and thin, Issei struggled to resist, but his strength was lost with each passing second of staring directly into his girlfriend's eyes. It only took 2 minutes for the young Hyoudou to give up and agree to bring Kurenai with him. Akeno just jumped in victory and tied her hair back up. With nothing else to do, the young couple headed towards the academy, without knowing that everything they had experienced was seen by the two adults inside the house. I told you that our son wouldn't be able to stand firm. Mickey looked mockingly at Goro, who only regretted having bet in favor of his son. You owe me a foot massage, darling. Goro could only speak with his tongue, but the older man was not going to leave things like that, especially if it concerns his wife. Without giving her time, Goro carried his wife bridal style, who let out a slight cry at the surprise of being carried by her husband after so many years. Honey, what are you doing? Although she seemed worried, inside she was starting to get a little hot. It's not obvious, my dear. A confident smile graced the older Hyoudu's face. I'll show you why I'm the man of the house. Going up the stairs, still with his wife in his arms, who still maintained the role of submissive, although inside she was dying of desire for this moment, reaching the second floor. Goro closed the door of his room with a kick once he entered with his wife, and the next 2 hours only the springs of the bed jumping and the wood of the bed hitting the wall could be heard. All this while young Hyoudou had a chill running down his spine, having a strange idea about his parents and the strong desire not to get home until night. Current affairs. Issei and Akeno were already near the main path that led directly to the entrance to the academy. The other students of different grades were visible in the distance, and the brunette couldn't help but feel anxious at the idea of the possible actions that would be born once they saw them. The brunette's stomach turned and a little sweat formed on his forehead, but fortunately he was not alone. Is something wrong, Anata? Akeno caught her lover's attention with her question. Issei came out of a trance and looked her straight in the eyes. Her partner's beautiful amethyst eyes calmed her heart. The bad thoughts dissolved into dust, and the warmth of emotion filled her heart. Without saying a word, Issei took Akeno's suitcase and put it next to him. With his free hand he took his beloved's hand and gave her his best smile. Nothing important, I just thank fate for joining my path with yours. Love, sweet words from a young man foolishly in love who was also reciprocated by his foolishly in love girlfriend. If you keep saying things like that, you'll make me give Kurenai a second sister. That comment got a laugh from both of them, although that joke didn't please a certain baby who refused to share his parents' attention. With their hands firmly intertwined, the couple in love joined the main path towards the academy, where the gazes of every student present on the pavement fixed their attention on the couple holding hands, leading almost everyone to shock, accompanied by the astonishment of a few of those present. The couple could easily predict the students' reaction. After all, it's not every day that you see one of the four great One-sama holding hands with the one nicknamed the perverted beast of Ko. Anyone would have reacted that way. Arriving at the entrance of the academy grounds, in the distance you could see Saji accompanied by Momo still by the door, doing what seemed to be council activities. As they got closer, the council duo saw him, and their reactions were the same as the other students when they saw them together, but the only difference was that the two of them did see the baby. I can't believe it. I mean, Sona Kaicho had told me just like she told everyone on the council. But I didn't believe it until I saw it now. Saji didn't hesitate to express his disbelief, while Momo looked lovingly at Kurenai, who was only looking at her breasts. If I wasn't surprised by your reaction, Saji, I would have reacted the same way, the brown-haired boy commented while Akeno offered Kurenai to Momo to carry for a while. By the way, Hyoudou, are you sure you want to bring him here? Remember that your reputation is not the most acclaimed. Let's say the brown-haired boy understood what the blonde was getting at and sighed. I know what you're worried about, Saji, and you have nothing to fear. We've got it covered. Although what Issei said still didn't completely convince the council member, Saji decided to believe him in the name of his friendship. When the time came for the bell to ring, the couple said goodbye to the duo and headed to the entrance of the building, leaving behind a Saji who wished his friend the best and a Momo who couldn't stop looking at her hands, drawing her partner's attention. Momo-san, are you okay? He asked, surprised, and the white-haired girl looked at him in her eyes without any expression. Genshiro Saji, I want a baby. At the words of the white-haired girl, Genshiro Saji's brain had stopped working at that very moment. Huh! It was all that came out of his mouth before he stopped working for the next 2 hours. Fine, I'll take care of Kurenai in the first period, and during the break I'll see you at the club, said the brown-haired boy while putting Kurenai in a more comfortable position to sleep. I don't think I can stand being away from my baby and my man for so long. Akeno at any moment seemed like she was going to explode with one of her tantrums that made her look like a spoiled child and not like an One-san of her age. Calm down, love. It will only be a few hours. You will see that in just a blink of an eye that time will fly by. Trust me. Yes, with those sweet words Akeno calmed down to the brown-haired boy's relief. Okay, Anata, I believe in your word. But promise me that you will think of me at all times. To Issei's sigh, Akeno let out her capricious girlfriend personality, something that the brunette didn't like very much at a time like this. Giving his yes at his girlfriend's insistence, Issei Hyoudou left for his living room with his daughter while Akeno just waved goodbye with her hand in the air, like a married woman saying goodbye to her husband who was about to go to war. Which was just an exaggeration, but in the eyes of a lover it was normal. While they were in their world, the rumor of their current relationship spread throughout the academy as if it were some kind of virus, and in just seconds the entire school knew about the relationship between Issei and Akeno, leaving behind the main detail of seeing Issei carrying a baby in his arms. But hey, everyone pays attention to the topic they want. In just 2 minutes the brunette was in front of the closed door of his classroom. He slowly took the doorknob, and while letting some air out of his lungs, the brunette slid the door to the side, giving way to the interior of the classroom, without waiting at all for what was coming in his direction. 2 fist-shaped projectiles went straight to his face. The brown-haired boy instinctively prioritized the safety of his sleeping child in his arms. Therefore, using an unknown agility to him, Issei evaded both projectiles that ended up falling forward, ending up lying on the ground. Can I know what's wrong with you two? The brown-haired boy asked the perverted duo, who were his companions and friends of the brown-haired boy. Both young men were quick to stand up and, without respecting the chestnut's space, they got too close to his face. It's not obvious, traitor, you turned your back on us, Motoharu exclaimed, annoyed, something that the brown-haired boy did not understand nor wanted to know. How is it possible that you, out of all the men in this school, how is it possible that you had the luck of being a shonen protagonist? It was Matsuda's turn to complain about the problem, which the brown-haired boy still didn't know exactly, and neither did his son. What the hell are you two talking about? Speak in Spanish and not Mandarin. The chestnut's patience was at its limit, and Dumb and Dumber were not helping much. We are talking about you, my good sir, who had the balls to come to this institute today with one of the biggest and most beautiful One-san of Ko Academy, and not only that, but you also came holding hands with her. That is certainly a sin. At Matsuda's shouts, many other students paid attention to what they heard, and the murmurs did not take long to appear. What I needed, thought the brown-haired boy as he saw the gossip spread like a virus from the Walking Dead. Hey, calm down a bit. You're scaring Kurenai with so much screaming. It was what the brown-haired boy asked his duo of friends who didn't see it strange. Who is Kurenai? Motohama asked before looking at his friend's chest and noticing a baby looking at him with no expression on his face. Hey Issei, what about that baby? I have asked. He's my son. It's not obvious. Issei's response shocked the Wonder Duo, but in just a second they came back to themselves, more nervous and more fearing the worst. Excuse me, Issei, I think I didn't hear. It must be the dirt in my ears. But you just said that the baby you're carrying is yours. Matsuda seemed like he was about to collapse, but that wasn't noticed by Issei, who decided to throw the American bomb at the Israelis. I said she's my daughter, Matsuda. If you have dirt in your ears, it's not my problem, the brown-haired boy commented, and the duo couldn't contain themselves any longer. How come you have a son/baby? The perverted duo's surprised cry caught the attention of those present, including the newly arrived teacher. All the students in the brown classroom finally noticed the presence of the baby who was in the arms of Koa's beast. No one there believed it, not even Aika, who was the closest, along with Kratos and Murayama, who were blank upon hearing those words. But what caught the brown-haired boy's attention was the weak sound escaping from his baby's mouth. Kurenai's face was beginning to turn red, her mouth opened and closed slightly. Her heel wrinkled and the weak sob was present signs that the baby was about to cry, and in just a second the crying began due to the fright the baby received at the cry of surprise. Matsuda and Motohama, pieces of shit, made him cry for some reason unknown to Issei. An enormous anger took over his mind, filling him with desires to kill the boys in front of him. The duo got to the point where they both hugged each other. At that precise moment the duo managed to see something much more terrifying than the angry girls from the Kengo Club. What was before their eyes were the eyes of an angry father seeing that they hurt his child. Calm down, Issei, it wasn't intentional. With some fear, Motohama spoke. It's true we didn't want to make him cry, Matsuda continued, but Issei didn't seem to want to listen. The strong idea of ripping off both of their heads was a tempting idea in his head, and before a possible double murder happened in that room, a wild Aika appeared on the scene. Wow, I expected something perverted from both of you, but making a baby cry is beyond my expectations of you two, were the words of Aika, who in a quick movement separated Kurenai from her father's arms, now being the center of Issei's attention. Hey, what do you think you're doing? The brown-haired boy replied, unaware of the control of his dragon instincts. Aika began to hum a melody, while she rocked little Kurenai in her arms slowly and gently. Kurenai began to calm down slowly as she felt him being rocked. The melody that reached his ears comforted him, and all evil vanished once he stopped crying. For everyone present it was an unexpected surprise. Everyone there expected to see a blood show, but everything changed when Aika entered the scene and calmed the waters like a lion tamer. Issei, seeing his cub well, suddenly made the homicidal thoughts disappear along with the anger. The brown-haired boy was relieved to see his son happy, and even more so when he saw how he used a little control of his little hand to rub Aika's chest, which she noticed, but did not say anything because he was just a baby. My son is a smart girl, the brown-haired boy thought with a mind clearer than the sky, but still retaining some annoyance for the duo who, upon being looked at again, were scared. If you make my son cry again, I'll kill you assholes. It was the warning given to the duo, who agreed frankly in fear. No problem, Matsuda scared said. If Issei, you have nothing to worry about, Motoharu answered, just as scared as Matsuda. The brown-haired boy nodded and then looked at Aika, who still had Kurenai in her arms. Thank you for your help, Aika, the boy thanked him, extending his arms to receive his son, but Aika didn't seem to agree with that. Aika? Can I have it for at least the first hour? The pervert asked, making puppy eyes at the brown-haired boy, who was not affected by it. No, he replied. Please, she insisted. The brown-haired boy was about to refuse again, but seeing his son trying to get his attention, Issei chose to look at his baby, who was trying to tell his father not to worry by raising and pulling his little hand while making tender attempts to speak. Sigh, okay, but during the break you give it back to me without exception. Understood. Aika gave a jump of victory and went to her place with Kurenai, which was near the Kendo girls' duo. Issei could only sigh and take a seat next to his friends, starting the class. On the part of the teacher, the aforementioned preferred not to say anything, and that is because when he saw Issei's look, his attempts screamed at him to run, leading the same man to decide not to mess with that teenager or things would go badly for him. In addition to that, he has the student council. They will surely easily take care of the matter, and with that in mind the class continued its course. But among the students there was one in particular who was not happy, and that was a random guy who looked at the brown-haired boy with hatred, since when he looked closely at the child he knew who the mother was, and he could not tolerate that. He took out his phone and informed his acquaintances at the academy, leading to this blessed group deciding to teach the brown-haired boy a lesson, being ignorant of the punishment they were going to receive in the end. Hour later, recess. The first hour classes had concluded. The students from different courses left their classrooms heading to the cafeteria for lunch, but inside one of the second-year classrooms a discussion was taking place. You promised, Issei, were Motoharu's words to the brown-haired boy, who just looked at him annoyed. I told you I can't go. You don't understand, or you're deaf, complained the brown-haired boy who was feeding his son with milk that he had in the bottle that was in his suitcase. But it's something that almost never happens, Issei. You're literally about to waste the best limited hamburger promo in the cafeteria, Matsuda complained. Besides, it was your idea. So I understand this duo of dumb and really dumb too. Now I am a father, therefore I have responsibilities. I cannot go and leave my son alone for a hamburger promo. Can you understand that? The brown-haired boy's words were serious, making the duo feel like stupid children for their insistence. There was no way to change the boy's mind, so they decided to give up with their protest. But once again a wild Aika enters the scene to make her sequel. I can take care of him while you go to the cafeteria, Issei Hyoudou spoke from behind him while massaging the shoulders of the brunette, who looked at her strangely for that action. Aika, sorry to ask, but can I know why you offer yourself so much to Kurenai City? The brown-haired boy couldn't understand why the perverted girl insisted. Isn't that obvious? Aika came out from behind and landed next to the brown-haired boy. Just look at him. No one can say no to that face of the cutest thing in the world. It was a point in favor of Aika. Of course she is the cutest little thing in the world. After all, her mother is the most adorable being that ever existed, and also the most nymphomaniac. He thought that last thing, remembering how they gave him a trophy for that. Leaving in second place a blue-eyed girl and another black-haired boy with pigtails who surely made a quickie with the taxi driver who brought him. But these are things that were better to think about for the sake of his mental health. Now tell me, do you accept that I take care of him until you return? Aika seemed excited by the idea, but Issei thought it over carefully before speaking. I guess that's no problem. I mean, it'll just be a few minutes, and then I can go back and go to the club with Kurenai. I didn't see anything wrong, which led me to sigh and nod. Fine, it'll just be a few minutes. Is that okay with you? Yes. Without giving the brown-haired boy time, Kiria took Kurenai, who laughed at being carried in the air, and the duo didn't wait any longer. They took Issei by the arms and went out the door, leaving Aika alone with Kurenai, not knowing that someone else was standing at the door waiting for their chance. Let the operation begin, the boy whispered before entering and closing the front door. In the third-year classroom, Akeno and Rias' classroom. Akeno Himejima once heard the bell ring, giving way to recess. The aforementioned would put away her belongings, and from her suitcase she would take out 2 bentos which were covered by a blanket, revealing the intentions of the Grammar Queen, who, ignoring the calls of her best friend, walked away, leaving behind Rias, who was upset to be ignored by her best friend, and more so when she knew where she was going. Rias, in her annoyed state, would take her food and walk out the door, with the difference that she was going to the club and Akeno was not, taking the redhead on a path, murmuring that no one could understand. On Akeno's part, she would happily reach the hallway where the second-year classrooms were located. Once she reached her beloved's classroom, without wasting time, she would move the sliding door to the side and enter. Once inside, Akeno would notice that her beloved and son were not, believing that perhaps they went ahead, and before leaving through the door, Akeno's demon ears detected a growl coming from the ground. When she turned to look better, she could notice a brown-haired girl on the ground holding her head. Are you okay? Akeno approached and helped the young woman with glasses, who turned out to be Aika. HGGG, my head, Aika complained, coming back to her senses, and as she did so her eyes opened wide and terror formed on her face. Damn it, it's not there. Who's not here? Akeno was a little scared by the girl's reaction, who looked at her and, without thinking about the consequences of her, spoke words. Kurenai. At the mention of the name, Akeno's eyes opened wide. We were here playing and someone hit me from behind. I don't know who, but they took Kurenai and I don't know where? The brunette explained to an Akeno who didn't seem to react. Without saying anything, the Himejima ran towards the door, leaving behind Aika and a feeling of pain in the chestnut's heart, thinking that maybe that baby was about to suffer a bad event because of her. For Akeno's part, she ignored all her surroundings and began to look for her baby, using her senses and any trace of magic similar to hers or her beloved's. While doing so, Akeno questioned herself, thinking that because of her selfishness her baby was in danger. Many negative emotions mixed in her head, but the main emotion was anger. For some unknown reason, every thought in Akeno's head was related to that feeling. She didn't know it, and she didn't care. What mattered was her baby. But what she didn't know was that she wasn't the only person in that state, and that person was her husband. On the other hand, from the academy with Issei. At the same time he was spending with Akeno, Issei was also searching for his child, trying to perceive the smell of his baby. also being flooded by negative emotions and thoughts. The brown-haired boy could not hold back and searched every part of the school, and all of that was due to what happened in the cafeteria. As the brown-haired boy and his friends stood in line, Issei's senses grew sharper to the point of being able to hear something similar to Superman at a much further distance. The brown-haired boy planned to ignore all of that, but there was a comment that caught his attention, and that comment had to do with his childhood. That miserable Hyoudou thinks he can come here with one of our one-san, and the biggest mistake he could have made. That comment did not please the brown-haired boy at all. Luckily my friends and I were not going to leave things like that, so we came up with a plan to, take out the trash. That was all it took for the anger to return and the Hyoudou's aggressive side to cloud his judgment. Not caring about anything, the brunette stepped out of the line and pushed everyone who was in his way, men and women alike. No one dared to challenge him because of the look in his eyes and face. It was like seeing an angry dragon. Once he reached the table where the boy was, without time to let him react, Issei would take one of the trays of food and smash it in his face. Followed by that he took a fork and stuck his hand in it, making him scream. But his scream did not last long, since he was grabbed by the nape of the neck to be slammed against the table 10 times, followed by being grabbed by the collar of his shirt and slammed against one of the pillars inside the cafeteria to receive 2 or 4 blows to the face, which knocked out several teeth and disfigured his nose. Issei lifted him into the air and, giving his best intimidating look, he sought answers from this random asshole. "Where is she?" the brown-haired boy asked, to which the random boy remained silent, but that only caused him to receive 5 blows to his stomach, taking all the air out of him. "I asked you, where is Kurenai?" he asked again, but the random boy just looked at him with hatred. "Pu-rot Hyoudou" were his words, followed by a spit full of blood on the brown-haired boy's face. Issei's eyes glowed green, his teeth turned sharp, and he charged his arm back. The brunette was ready to kill the boy, but the duo of friends restrained him, and thanks to that the blow did not kill the random, but it did knock him out and sank his face, leaving him without front teeth and nose. Issei broke free from his friend's bonds and dropped the random room. Without being stopped, the boy headed for the exit of the place, looking ugly at any teacher who tried to stop him. He had a goal, and that goal was to find his son, so once he left he began to run down the hallway at a speed equal to that of a gazelle fleeing from its natural predator. Running from here to there, checking each room using his sense of smell, his hearing and his eagle eye, the brown-haired boy didn't stop even to breathe. Any room that was in his range of vision was a room that was being checked by the brown-haired boy. Beginning to despair at the failed attempts of his search, the brown-haired boy passed through the door of the women's bathroom, where his ears managed to pick up a sound similar to a cry. Issei didn't think about it, and entered through the door, being seen by the girls who were there, who screamed when they saw Issei. But the brown-haired boy silenced them and concentrated, listening to the crying that was louder. Issei looked out the window that was near the stretch, and there he looked outside, noticing the mini forest inside the academy. But his eyes ignored nature, and there he saw 2 idiots, one of which had his one-legged child, while the other laughed, accompanied by 2 other girls that he recognized because those 2 they were from the Kendo Club. His blood was boiling and anger was blinding him. Ignorant of his actions, the brown-haired boy pressed against the bathroom wall, which began to crack under the brown-haired boy's strength. The girls present fled from there, leaving Issei alone and his anger that in just seconds was about to destroy the wall. The brown-haired boy pulled back his arm and with a single blow demolished the wall, which caught the attention of the group that had Kurenai. "What the hell was that?" the third-year boy asked. "I don't know, maybe the wall fell down or whatever?" The second one spoke anyway. "Pass the bag, we have to throw this in the trash." "Here you go," said one of the Kendo girls, passing him a black bag. "This will teach that pervert to stop spying on us." "Don't you think this is too much? I mean, he's just a baby." The second Kendo girl spoke, not very convinced of what she was doing. "It's too late to regret. Besides, this is a punishment for Hyoudou for having the nerve to touch the great Akeno-sama." The third determined one spoke. "No one is worthy of being with the most loving Akeno-sama," were his words in retirement, without knowing who was nearby him and his group. Era, and who to say that Mayonata is not worthy of me?" A sweet voice spoke from the shadow of a tree, revealing itself to be Akeno, who slowly approached the group of 4. Akeno-sama, the third year, shouted to his classmate. Seeing her smile, the boy assumed that his actions were approved by her. If only he knew he was wrong. "Don't worry, Akeno-sama, your problems will soon be solved," the boy spoke. Oh really, she replied, holding back the desire to rip the heads off all four of them. That's right, Akeno-sama, one of the confident kendo girls approached her. Dear senpai, once we put that mistake in the garbage bag, it will only be a matter of time before the rats. Her dialogue was interrupted when she received a strong slap that made her skid against the ground, becoming unconscious and with a red mark in the shape of a hand. The other three remaining did not believe the version. Literally, their beloved one Issei with a single blow sent one of her companions to St. Peter, and when looking again at the girl they noticed that her sweet smile was now an expressionless look with eyes that only generated terror and pain. You have only this moment to stop turning me into my baby, or else I will make him suffer like hell. A strong threat from the Himejima that made them wet their pants. Wait, Akeno-sama. I don't. Akeno interrupted the other kendo girl again, who suffered the same fate as her comparison for trying to save herself. You are as guilty as your friend. You are not going to escape your punishment. His words were as cold as polar ice. The male duo took several steps back when they saw the fate of their female duo. The situation was out of hand and they didn't know what else to do. Just thinking that this could get worse was terrifying. But unfortunately it did get worse. The duo felt something blowing on the back of their necks, and that made them step back in fear, noticing a pair of green eyes that only showed superiority. The owner of those eyes stepped forward, revealing Issei, but with a different appearance, and that was because the entire upper part of his face was covered in red scales, making him look much more intimidating. The second-year boy couldn't take it anymore, and pushing his friend he got up and ran away without knowing that because of that action, the third-year boy dropped Kurenai, who ended up hitting his head, making him cry even harder, thus causing the chain that held back the parents' anger to explode. With a strong blow, the second-year boy's leg broke, making him fall, and then seeing him agonize in pain. The person responsible for this action was not the brown-haired boy's legs but his new limb, which was his new tail of the same color as the scales on his face. Issei looked at him indifferently, using his new tail to break his other leg, followed by multiple kicks to the face, which with each blow was disfiguring his face to the point of being unrecognizable. The third-year boy tried to flee, but when he saw a shadow covering him, he looked up and found Akeno, who was comforting her beloved baby who just kept crying. You're not leaving, not until you pay for hurting our baby. The young man felt something around his neck, and shortly after he was dragged backwards while Akeno marched towards the girls who seemed to be about to wake up. It's good that you woke up because your punishment isn't over yet, were Akeno's words while small sparks were generated in her fingers, knowing what was coming. On Issei's part, he only held the boy in the air, who only asked for mercy. But the brown-haired boy was not going to show it. You had the nerve to kidnap my child, plus you made him cry and let him fall. Mercy for you is just a mere illusion, and I will make sure that you remember to never mess with the dragon's baby again. With that statement, the brown-haired boy began the torture of the young man, who only screamed and screamed because of the hell he was alive. For an hour there were screams and cries of pain, agony and despair, and the council did not hesitate to take action. That day, every student, teacher and council employee learned a very, very important lesson. Never mess with the offspring of a couple, or the wrath of both parents will fall on the perpetrator. Chapter 6. Learning from your mistakes. Student council room after school. Hours later, the lovely couple of perverts were sitting in front of the current student council president, Sona Shirtorai, also known by the supernatural side as Sona Citri, heiress of the Citri clan. The aforementioned heiress did not look at all happy about what happened hours ago, where her people had to stop a possible massacre by the couple in front of her. The vein that throbbed and stood out below her neck was a sign that the brunette was holding back her and her strong desire to want to rip both of their heads off for what happened at noon. The tension was evident in the air, and everyone present in the room could feel it. Oh well, almost everyone, because there were two exceptions, which were Saji and Momo, who were not paying full attention to the subject. Momo was busy checking a book with the title, List of Cute Names for Your Baby, while Saji searched on his phone for a tutorial on how to make a fake ID and escape to Latin America. But in his search, only a meme came up that seemed funny to anyone. Not there, the sheep, Saji whispered, forgetting why he was on his phone, ignoring what was happening in the student council room. So, can you explain to me what happened hours ago, and believe me that staying silent will not help you at all. These were the harsh words of Sona, who was waiting for an answer from the couple who did not seem to want to talk. You know perfectly well that your mistress can't save you from this, because I hope you understand the condition you two are in. Sona paused before continuing. So can you explain to me why there are 5 students on the way to the hospital where 2 of they have 3rd and 2nd degree burns, adding up to 3 students with psychological trauma and several broken bones as well as their disfigured faces? Can you explain to me, or do I have to force you out of them? With emphasis in her tone, Sona stood up from her seat and banged the table, drawing everyone's attention, including the 2 who weren't paying attention. Both Issei and Akeno didn't know what to say. The brunette had his gaze on the floor, as did his partner. He was aware that his actions had crossed the line, but even being aware of that, he didn't feel any guilt. In fact, it seemed that it was the opposite, showing that Akeno had indeed infected him with some of her sadism at all the times when both of them became strong, hard, and above all passionate. The chestnut had to be the only one responsible. He did not want his beloved to suffer. He gathered his courage and looked up, determined to speak face to face with his superior. Well, you see, Sona Kaicho, the brown-haired boy felt someone take his hand. When he turned around, he could see Akeno shaking her head with a knowing smile. No, Anada, let me take care of it. Akeno looked ahead, although Issei wanted to intervene, but Akeno was more insistent than him. I suppose you'll be the one to give me an explanation, or am I wrong, Himejima? Sona used the brunette's surname, showing that her mood was still the same as before. Correct, Sona-san, Akeno clarified, closing her eyes briefly before continuing with the following words. It was all Issei's fault. That's right, the brown-haired boy commented before realizing his girl's words. Wait, what? Well, yes, Anada had the idea of bringing Kurenai to the academy to show off and hang out with her little champion. Akeno began to explain with the look on her man's face that she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Are you seriously throwing me in front of the bus like that, Akeno? Issei felt betrayed, but when he saw his girlfriend laughing he realized it was a joke. But it will be you. Issei had to suppress an insult, thinking that would be something childish on his part, so as the only option he crossed his arms and gave her an angry look. Heh, Anada, don't get angry, you know I would never do that to you. Akeno grabbed his shoulder, but the brunette just continued with his posture. Oh, come on, it was just a joke. You know how I am when you react like that. Issei didn't listen to her, and Akeno simply pouted at her sweetheart's attitude. All this in front of Sona, who had a slight twitch in her eye when she saw that the present duo took her reprimanding as if it were a child's game, and that led her to release a bit of her demon aura that made the ground where she was standing freeze, giving a slight chill to all the members of her nobility who knew that their queen was angrier than she normally is. While the couple was doing their thing, the floor in the room began to be covered in ice. Those less accustomed to the cold of their king backed away, while Tsubaki used magic to avoid being victims of her lady's cold. She already knew the sub-zero level of her ice, and she was not in the mood to be a human popsicle. The couple, feeling the sudden change in temperature, looked around, noticing most of the student council away from their location, and when they looked where Sona was, the only thing they found was an ice queen pointing a scythe at them as if it were death itself, which scared them and made them shiver more than the cold itself. If you've already finished your couple's theater, how about you settle down and give me a good explanation about your actions at noon, and I don't want any details out of place. The couple obeyed the order and got an order in their place. Sona sat down and stopped releasing her ice magic to everyone's relief, and without further ado she waited for the story of the young horny couple. In the end, Issei took the words and began to relate what happened from the morning until recess time in great detail, saying that many of the females present thought when they heard the part where he was going to do it in the morning it was a surprise for everyone except for Sona and Tsubaki, who, when witnessing what happened, the engagement of Rias, assumed that these two did it as if there was no tomorrow. In the end, the brown-haired man concluded with his explanation of today, and Akeno was willing to continue telling about the two, but Sona raised her hand as a sign of break because she already knew what Himejima and her hot life were going to say. A brief silence fell in the room as Sona rubbed her temple at Issei's explanation. While it was a headache for Sona to have to deal with this type of situation, for the other members of the council it was a condolence for their president who had to put up with this type of shit. But in Tsubaki's case, although she was always close to Sona to relieve her stress with her support and such, at present it was impossible for her, and that was due to the little baby in her arms who kept playing with her breasts, which only tickled the brunette, who did everything possible to maintain her composure, as in one Issei. That would be all, Sona Kaicho, the brown-haired boy finished with a midday explanation, eliciting a sigh from the short-haired brunette, who only regretted her fate. Well, first of all, Akeno, it was not necessary to give details about your relationship in bed and in the rest of your life. Second, if you are going to blame someone, Akeno, at least make it credible, because nobody would think that Hyoudou would come to the academy shouting things like, "I'm a dad," or "I've come to show off my son." Well, I don't think it's necessary, the brown-haired girl was interrupted by the brunette, continuing with her examples. The most believable thing would be that she would shout things like, "I got a nice boyfriend," or maybe, "I'm not a virgin anymore," or maybe, "I already got her and got a girlfriend." We understand. Issei raised his voice to stop this embarrassment. He had dignity, and running to his school and showing off was not his style, although he would surely say that in his state of joy. But he was not going to admit that, never in his life. Whatever, leaving aside Hyoudou and his ecstasy of no longer being a virgin, the brown-haired boy only grimaced at the last point. "I'm afraid I must suspend you both for a long time, and there are no exceptions to this decision." The serious tone in which he said it was clear to the duo that he saw such punishment as unfair. After all, they were the ones who attacked his child, but they were also the cause of this madness, so they said nothing in his defense. "What will happen to those Kaicho bastards?" Issei asked, curious to know the end of his victims, the same ones he would not hesitate to attack again if he had the opportunity again. Sona just sighed at the question and adjusted her glasses again, leaving the doubt as to whether she did it because the glasses were too big for her or she just did it to look cool, a mystery that remained unanswered. "After what happened, I was thinking of expelling them, but I'm only going to suspend them for a long period of time." His serious tone was evident of his decision, but for the couple it didn't seem right. "They're just going to suspend them, and that's it, out of anger." The brown-haired boy stood up from his seat, showing his fangs again and unconsciously. "Hyoudou, this is the most I can do without raising suspicion. It's a miracle that we prevented this disaster from escalating to a critical scale." Although Sona didn't show it, deep inside her patience was reaching its limit. "My child was in danger because of those animals." In his anger, the brown-haired boy hit the desk of the short film, cracking said piece of furniture in the process. "In case you haven't noticed, Hyoudou, your son's matter was solely his fault, and not the attacker's." Sona stood up from her place and confronted the brunette, who didn't back down. He only got angry. "My fault?" The brown-haired boy felt outrageous, but a part of him agreed with Sona, but his anger prevented the young man from thinking coherently. "First, you brought a minor to an academic institute. Second, you left your own son alone with a single person to take care of him. And third, but last, you exposed your child to the danger of newborn." Each enumeration only made the brown-haired boy swallow his words, while his partner only listened in silence, accepting each word. Akeno knew it was her fault. Being spoiled by her boyfriend made her capricious and pampered without accepting a no for an answer. The idea of bringing Kurenai was her fault. Leaving her boyfriend alone with her baby was another mistake, and to finish the list, putting her son in danger. Akeno could only accept Sona's words silently because it was the truth, but the only thing she couldn't accept was the last thing Sona said. "Hyoudou, it is clear that your actions speak for you, and as far as I am concerned, you are not ready to be a father. In fact, it seems that you are a terrible father to your son, who fortunately is still alive despite that strong blow to the head." Sona's words caused a horizontal cut in the heart of the brown-haired boy, who took a step back upon hearing those words. Anger turned to fury and sadness and question, were Sona's words true? It was not his fault that this happened, he accepted without putting much effort at the request of his spoiled girlfriend. He left his son with Aika without knowing the danger that lurked, and it almost ended up killing a group of students who should find a life and not hang out with this kind of idiots. Issei Hyoudou could only lower his head, believing Sona's words, who only said it because of the anger she felt at that moment due to her stress. Observing the result of her words, Sona regretted what she said. It was not her intention to hurt the brunette in that way. She only wanted to reprimand him for his actions and was going to clear his head, if it weren't for the fact that her gaze was put in the opposite direction by an unknown force that left everyone present in the room in shock. Splaz! Akeno Himejima, who had been silently sitting in her seat at one point, was currently standing with her hand outstretched in front of a flushed-cheeked Sona Citri. Akeno, in a fit of rage at Sona's words, had slapped her, causing the latter to turn her gaze away. Sona's glasses fell to the ground and the burning pain on Sona's cheek made itself present on her skin, while Himejima, with her eyes on the floor, walked to Tsubaki and took her baby from the aforementioned arms. Kurenai, who had been separated from the female, was about to recriminate her mother, but upon sensing her parents' mood, she decided to remain silent and cooperate. Sona never moved from her spot. She remained standing in that same place while the brunette with a ponytail passed by her, staying close to her partner, who had no words at that moment, because he was still impressed by what he saw. "Let's go, Anada. Kurenai must be tired after so much fuss." Without looking at him, Akeno went straight to the exit, followed by her partner, who followed her from behind. Tsubaki was going to stop them, but her king's hand prevented her from doing so, leaving everything silent until the sound of the door closing brought life back to the council room. "Are you sure you want to let them go like that?" Tsubaki had her doubts, but Sona just took her glasses and put them back on. "What's done is done, Tsubaki, and I'm also somewhat to blame. I let myself get carried away by my mood, and these were the consequences." Sona sighed and returned to her place. "Take the rest of the day off. I need to rest a little about this matter." The council members wanted to object, seeing that their king was wrong, but seeing the pleading look of their superior Tsubaki, the council member decided to obey the order, leaving the room and leaving Sona alone next to Tsubaki, who only placed her hand on the short-haired girl's shoulder, and she placed her hand on top of her. "Thank you," she thanked internally as she cleared her mind and fought to avoid the bad emotions that tried to take control over her. But Sona was stronger, making a fool of those clumsy attempts to upset her. "I need a vacation and to apologize to those two, but for now I'm just going to rest with that in mind and pending." The president of the council closed his eyes with a strong desire to rest. Being seen by her vice president, who could only smile at her king and admire everything she did for the good of her clan and her dream, were points that demonstrated the great potential of Sona Citri of the Citri clan. The sky was turning dark. The orange color that adorned it would disappear in a few hours. In the halls of the Ko Academy, the couple of first-time parents could be seen walking in total silence. After what happened at the council and the scene of Akeno hitting Sona came and went into the brunette's mind, who only looked sideways at her dear beloved, who only walked in silence, and with her hair covering her eyes. Issei lowered his gaze to the area of his partner's breasts, but his attention was not on the twins that Akeno was carrying, but rather on her son, who reflected concern in his eyes. Kurenai, seeing his mother's sad face, the minor tried to get her attention. With the slight strength that his small body possessed, Kurenai pulled on his mother's clothes with the intention of getting her attention, but seeing that his efforts were not successful, they frustrated him and made him want to cry in his mother's arms. Issei, witnessing his son's effort, motivated him to leave this atmosphere of silence. He sighed and took his girlfriend's shoulder to stop Akeno's walking and his own. The boy did not want his female to continue torturing herself like that. He did not like that. He preferred to see her smile. Her smile always relieved his heart, and that same smile always showed the true feeling of happiness of the Himejima. But seeing those fallen and trembling lips with a slight desire to cry was something that Issei did not like at all. He swore himself to make her happy, and as a man and boyfriend, that was what he was going to do. "We can talk, Akeno," he spoke in a soft tone. The boy wanted to ease the pain in his heart, not make it worse. Akeno, for her part, tried to continue, but Issei's grip prevented her from doing so. The female's body had no strength, and her heart did not allow her to be brusque with the people she appreciated most in her life. Being between a rock and a hard place, Himejima's lips opened slightly to let out some air from within, facing the fact that she had to talk to her partner now, which complicated Akeno's state, and before she could even say a word. In the distance, a voice called the two from a distance, to the annoyance of the brown-haired girl and relief for the brunette. "Issei-san, Himejima-sama." Ika Kiri came running from the other side of the hallway with a pair of bandages tied to her head. The memory of the classroom flashed through the brown-haired boy's mind, where he found his partner lying on the floor with a severe headache. Issei felt bad for leaving Ika alone, but the feeling of anger and despair at that moment didn't allow him to worry about anyone other than his baby and his beloved. While thinking about that, Ika had already arrived where they were standing. The brunette's gaze reflected concern and also a bit of fear. Ika, despite having a confident and perverted personality, also sometimes showed other facets that no one expected her to have, and one of those was fear. Once she caught her breath, the brunette looked at the young couple with their baby without saying anything. Aika bowed and apologized to the duo, to the surprise of both young people. "I'm so sorry about that," Aika, with her head bowed and eyes closed, asked for a second apology. "It's my fault. I didn't want to trip and fall," with her son in her arms. "Fall?" Issei did not understand Aika's words, but remembering what Sona had said, the boy understood why Aika was in front of him apologizing. "Aika, calm down. I know it was my mistake and I accept it, but please forgive me." Aika insisted on her apology, and that only made Issei feel worse. Akeno just kept silent. She was more affected by the idea of maybe not being a good mother, and that led Himejima not acting, leaving the brunette alone in the situation. Issei, knowing that he couldn't count on Akeno, chose to take the reins of the problem on his own, and that's what he did. He took Aika's shoulders and made her stand firm, keeping the female's eyes glued to his due to eye contact. Fear, guilt, and worry were reflected in Aika's eyes, but Issei's were another story. Feelings like calm, appreciation, and relief were what the brown-haired man's eyes reflected, causing the female's heart to slowly calm down and begin to warm up. "Calm down," the soft voice tickled Aika's ears and caused her heart to race. "Stop blaming yourself, Aika. I don't hate you or anything related to that. I understand that it was a mistake and you don't need to keep tormenting yourself for it." Quality words that calmed Aika's pain in her eyes, along with the accumulated tears, reflected that emotion. "So you don't hate me and Kurenai neither." Issei in his response took his son for a moment, and put him in the arms of his perverted friend. Kiryu and the baby shared glances for seconds. Kurenai wanted to prioritize her mother's pain, but upon feeling the emotions of the girl carrying him, she knew what her father's intentions were in being understanding despite being a baby of a few days. The boy dedicated to smile to the girl, adding her usual fondling of the girl's breasts, who only laughed at that. For Kiryu it was strange. Inside his heart there was pain and guilt, but now it was the opposite. Warmth and relief were what covered his head currently. He hugged the baby with love and internally thanked the baby from the bottom of his heart for giving him his forgiveness despite not knowing the truth. After a while the brunette gave Issei back her baby, and at the moment of touching the boy's hands, an emotion that she didn't know she had colored the cheeks of the pervert who, once she broke away from Kurenai, took a few steps back from the boy. "Thank you for accepting my apologies, Issei. It really means a lot to me." Aika bows again before the couple, who only agreed. "Don't worry, Aika. After all, I can't hate Kurenai's aunt, can I?" At the question in a funny tone, the brunette's eyes opened wide and the emotion of joy was reflected in her astonishment and disbelief. "Are you serious?" Aika couldn't believe it. "Well, I know it's a very hasty decision considering that you've only known Kurenai for 1 day, but you proved to be someone trustworthy and also responsible. I don't see any problem in telling you that I was officially Kurenai's aunt. Just don't disappoint me or make me regret it, okay?" Aika was bursting with happiness, and even more so when she took Kurenai again from the brown-haired boy's arms. "Hey. Ha ha ha, I knew it was just a matter of time to be your aunt. You cute and precious little thing." Aika filled Kurenai's cheeks with kisses, who couldn't help but laugh with joy at her new aunt's kisses. While that was happening, the father was witness to the happy moment of Aika and his son, but if he looked sideways at his side he would notice his beloved still lost in her negative thoughts. Things that the brown-haired boy did not like to see at all. He knew he had to talk to her. But his moment was gone when Aika arrived, having the next opportunity. When he gets home there in his room, he will be able to achieve his goal, and he will not let anything interfere this time. Hayata residence, afternoon/night. Before being able to return home, the brown-haired boy and his partner went to the club to notify their president of their retirement, something that Rias didn't give a damn about. But hiding her disinterest, she let them go without any problem while the others continued with their corresponding activities. The walk home was quiet. Issei tried to cheer up his girlfriend by starting conversations, reminiscing about past moments. Even Kurenai himself tried to cheer her up by blowing saliva bubbles, but Akeno hadn't reacted to any of the two's attempts to cheer her up. Kurenai at this point felt useless, and that affected her to the point of crying in order to get her mother's attention. Akeno in response just handed Kurenai to Issei and took the lead to get home. The brunette's heart tightened as he saw his wife's action, while his son cried in her arms. He had to do something soon or else it would be too late for both of them. Upon arriving at the house, Akeno politely greeted the Hyoudou gentleman who returned the greeting, but upon seeing the brunette's sad expression, the smiles of the two older ones disappeared before seeing Akeno go up the stairs. At the same time, Issei entered with a still crying Kurenai in his arms. "Son, did something happen at school?" Mickey took the floor and approached his only son. "Things happen, Mom, and I will tell you in due time. For now I must go and talk to Akeno. Do you think you can?" Issei did not finish the sentence because his mother took Kurenai in her arms. "As a mother and a married woman, I understand what you mean, R." Mickey gave him a sweet smile that eased the pain in the chestnut's heart. "Go and talk to her. We'll wait for you here. Don't give up and be careful with everything she tells you, son. Women like to be heard, and I am a witness to that." Goro joined the family conversation and took his wife by the waist. "Go help your girls, son." With a thumbs up, the older brown-haired man gave his support to his only son. "They are the best," praised the chestnut, now with more strength thanks to the support of his parents. Before leaving for battle, Issei bent his knees a little to be in front of his son, who looked at him with his slightly tearful eyes. The brown-haired boy dedicated a warm smile to his first child and placed his palm on the youngest's head. Kurenai, upon feeling the touch of her father's hand, lost all desire to cry, feeling a strong relief in her heart. "Don't worry, Kurenai. Dad will make sure that Mom smiles again, and also that she pampers you again like she normally does." A kiss on the forehead, and the brown-haired boy went to battle, leaving only the Hyoudou lords with Kurenai in the living room. "So women like to be listened to. Where did you learn that from?" Mickey once saw that her son was gone. She faced her husband, remembering well the words of her man. "Well, we've been married for a long time, and I thought you liked being listened to and that kind of thing." Goro only said that to motivate his son, and as usual he didn't expect the side effect of his words. "Oh, so when we were dating you listened to what I said and you didn't spend your time staring at my bust with an idiotic look on your face, or am I wrong?" Mickey questioned her man, who simply walked into the lion's den alone. "Well, of course, what kind of man do you think I am, a woman?" Goro acted offended and crossed his arms and turned his gaze to emphasize his annoyance. Although the reality was that he did spend his time staring at his current wife's breasts in those years of youth where his simple answers to his wife's questions were, "Do you understand? Are you listening to me? Do I look good in this dress or not?" Goro's answers were, "I understand. Of course I do, you look hexy." Simple but accommodating answers that saved Goro 75% of the time. "So you wouldn't mind reminding me of the talk we had on our 3rd anniversary, would you?" Mickey's question took the air out of Goro's lungs, imaginatively clear. "I'm already screwed." Goro began to sweat profusely as he accelerated the movement of the mental factory in his brain. He had to remember that conversation that happened a long time ago, and if he didn't, he would probably sleep in the back of his car tonight, and it wasn't a very pleasant night to sleep there, especially with the cold weather that he had been announced in advance. With no other option, Goro decided to take a chance. If many people take a chance in casinos, why not take a chance here and now with his wife? The memory was chosen at random, and with that in mind, he spoke with total confidence in front of his wife's eyes. "At that moment you told me that you totally refused to have a threesome," was the only thing Goro said before falling silent. Mickey looked at him straight in his eyes, and Goro trembled because of that. Looking into his wife's eyes was like looking straight into the sun, that is, it burned you. But to Goro's relief his wife smiled. "I'm glad to know that you were attentive and not a fool who only ate me." With his eyes happy, Mickey turned her back and walked to the kitchen with Kurenai. "Now that I remember, what was the reason for that trio?" "I don't remember very well." Goro, after his save, began to think about the reason why that conversation started. "Oh, it wasn't a big deal. I was just telling you that I refused to have a threesome with my friends from work while you watched us from the corner." Goro's jaw dropped to the floor, incredulous at what his wife said, and also because I have already completely remembered that conversation. "What? Everyone said she had an irresistible ass." And they were not wrong in saying that. Goro fixed his gaze on his wife's dog, who, upon feeling her husband's eyes, moved her waist mischievously before giving herself a spanking that made the hairs of the older Hyoudou stand on end, who howls like a wolf at his wife's mischievous action. All this being seen and heard by Kurenai, who, despite being a baby, strongly wished to be able to walk to get out of the arms of her grandparents to avoid continuing to be a witness to the flirting of these two, Without a doubt the perverted genes of the Hyoudou will be her downfall once she grows up. But only time will tell in due time. Upper floor Issei's room. Issei, after leaving his parents and son behind, stood in front of the door of his room. The boy knew that his beloved was inside. At first he was going to enter without further ado, but he stopped when he grabbed the doorknob. If he entered abruptly, that would only scare his girl, making her think that he was angry with her. Issei sighed and thought about what he was going to say next as well as what he was going to do. He closed his eyes for a second and opened them, ready to do what he had to do, and without further ado he knocked on the door of his own room. "Akeno, are you there?" the brunette asked without receiving an answer from the other side, but he knew she was there. The smell of her perfume was noticeable. "I'm going in." With that warning, the brunette opened the door and entered inside. Entering the room, the first thing he noticed was that the light was off and the curtains closed, but that was no impediment for Issei being a demon. When he focused his attention on the bed, he noticed the large bulge covered by the sheets. He looked at the pillow and noticed his girl's uniform scattered on the floor, which only made him sigh. Akeno was refined, clean and polite, but when she wanted to, she made an exception to act like a capricious girl, and even more so when she was inside her room. Shaking his head, the young brown-haired boy took each part of the uniform, including his girlfriend's freshly used underwear, folded it and left it on his desk. The brown-haired boy didn't have time to do one of his classic perverted things. Now he had to deal with his downcast girlfriend, approaching the bed. The young Hyoudou sat on a corner of it while Akeno only moved further away from him. The silence seemed eternal, the seconds were long and no one formulated a word. Issei, seeing the space, did not hesitate, and lay down next to the lump in his bed, face to face. With his hand he took the corner of the sheet and pulled it away, revealing Akeno's face and her sad look reflected in her eyes. Issei, seeing her like he didn't think twice, and took off his uniform while he was still lying down, remaining only in his underwear and his red shirt before getting into the sheets with Akeno, who didn't move from her spot for a second. They both stared at each other without saying anything or having any intentions of starting something, but the brunette didn't want to extend this anymore and chose to be the first. "Can we return to the previous topic, Akeno?" Himejima in response looked away before speaking. "Shirt," she whispered, and the brown-haired boy didn't understand. "Shirt?" he asked, and Akeno just pointed at his red shirt, which he quickly took off and was taken by Akeno to hide her face from her boyfriend's sight again. "Akeno," was the murmur she let out with her shirt stuck to her face. Issei just looked at his partner, knowing more or less what he did that way. "You're like this because of what Sona said, right?" To Issei's surprise, Akeno said, "Denied?" "It's because of what happened with Kurenai." Akeno denies again. "Then what has you like this, Akeno? Please help me understand you. I don't want to see you like this anymore. It hurts me to see my girlfriend sad and not be able to do anything to ease your pain, and that frustrates me more than you think." Now it was Issei's turn to feel bad when he saw that he was not able to help his female. Akeno slightly pulled the shirt off her face to look at him. The downcast look and sad expression was something she couldn't tolerate, and it was painful for her to see him like that. Her heart ordered her to be sincere, and that was what was going to happen. Issei, she caught the boy's attention, who returned his gaze to the female's eyes. "What Sona said as well as what happened at noon are part of why I am like this." Akeno was sincere, and in search of support to continue she took her boy's hands. "If they are partly, then what is the strength of your pain?" The boy caressed his girlfriend's hands with his fingers to give her his warmth. "My whims," Akeno revealed, receiving the heat that Issei generated in her. "Ever since I can remember, you always pamper me and I do what I want when I'm with you, and we both know that sometimes that ends up harming you in some way." The brown-haired boy wanted to contradict that, but he fell silent as he remembered the past. On some occasions Akeno's whims did harm him in a certain way, whether good or bad, and when the thing with Kurenai came, that was a different matter in itself. Issei took it well, but honestly apart from him he doubted whether that was the right thing to do or not. But he still accepted the challenge, and here he was after all. Being a father was not easy. There was also the case of Kurenai. When I found out that I had become pregnant with you, I was terrified, and more than once I had thoughts that I regretted. This day, Akeno continued, and Issei was surprised by that. Saying it wasn't a lie wasn't right. Issei himself had a certain idea about those thoughts, but seeing that Akeno never showed them, he foolishly assumed that everything was fine, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. With all that, and what Sona said, it made me wonder if I'm really being a mother or if I'm just a capricious girl who only has Kurenai on a whim until before finishing. Akeno's hands were lightly squeezed by the brown-haired boy's hands as a sign that she will stop. Don't even think about finishing that dialogue. Akeno Himejima, the aforementioned, looked at her boyfriend's face with surprise. When he got angry, Issei didn't hesitate to call her by her first and last name, a sign that he was upset by something she did. I don't want you to treat me like that again. But Issei interrupts him again. But nothing. Issei raised his voice and hugged her. Akeno, you are not a bad mother. You like me are beginners. We make mistakes and that is not bad. Issei separated and looked at her in the eyes. Never say again that you are bad, Akeno, because you are not. You are my girlfriend and mother of my baby. Nothing in the world will change that. But Akeno searched for some argument against her partner's words, but her heart wouldn't let her brain think because of the emotions that made her heart race. I know very well that what happened today was a mistake from both of us, and we must bear that even if it hurts us. But we learn more from mistakes, and that teaches us not to make them twice. Issei placed his hand on his partner's face and caressed her with love. That's why I ask you to stop torturing yourself like that. If you feel like a failure as a mother, then I will force myself to feel like a bad father. I will never leave you alone even if the world burns. You don't plan on leaving you or Kurenai, understood? Akeno, unable to bear it any longer, hugged the boy, letting out everything she was holding in her shoulder. Issei just hugged her and comforted her, letting out everything that was tormenting the female. The tests and challenges of life were going to be more difficult from now on, but together they were going to overcome them even if it cost them their lives. Some time later, Akeno had finished crying on her male's shoulder. Her eyes were red from crying. Issei for his part only wiped away the remains of tears that rested on Akeno's red cheeks while the aforementioned touched her boy's lips. The atmosphere became romantic, and without thinking, they both cut their distance to join their lips in a beautiful kiss full of love and heat. The hearts of the two synchronized to the rhythm of the score. The time of both stopped in that kiss that seemed to last an eternity. Both young people separate to look into each other's eyes again. Every time they did, it was as if it were the first time for both. Both knew that no matter how much time they passed, for both of them it will be the first time they did it. I love you, Akeno Himejima, Issei declared with love and tenderness. I love you much more, Anata, Akeno declared, calling her first love again by that nickname that warmed the young pervert's heart. The two joined forces and shared one more moment as a couple before moving on to the next thing on their list. You know what we have to do, right? Issei asked, and Akeno agreed. We must talk to your parents about today, but what reality should we tell them? Akeno did not know whether to tell the truth or the other truth. Even though it hurts me, we must say the altered reality. Knowing my parents, she will surely take action on the matter, and that will only make Sona hate us more than she already does. The brown-haired boy was not happy with the idea, but there was no alternative. That reminds me that I must apologize to Sona for how I behaved in the council and also for the blow. Akeno remembered that moment and felt bad about how she treated Sona. One step at a time. We must go and talk to my parents first. Akeno agreed, and Issei was the first to stand up. Give me back my Akeno. In a single second put on her boyfriend's shirt in front of him. No, she happily put on that smile she always carries with her again, which only made the brown-haired boy laugh. I guess you're back to being yourself now. Akeno just laughed, and stood up, exposing her lower half and awakening something underneath the boy. Era, are you hungry? Anata. Akeno put her hands on the desk and shook her hips. Issei gulped because he had a strong desire to eat meat, and in front of him were some meaty mountains that seemed delicious to him. A tempting offer, but we must go downstairs. With pain in his words, Issei gave up on the offer, and Akeno just laughed before going for his underwear. Although a little bite didn't hurt. With their opportunity lost, the two young people went down to the lower floor to talk to the Hyoudou lords who were waiting for them downstairs. Once downstairs, the Hyoudou lords were waiting for them with food on the table ready to be fueled for everyone. Issei and Akeno sat at the table, and before they could eat, the young couple asked the older duo for a break, who looked at them strangely, but remembering what happened an hour ago, they let the couple talk. Issei and Akeno confessed what happened at the academy. Of course, the conversation had some changes, slightly revealing the true story of what happened. Once they finished talking, both adults looked at each other before nodding. Obviously, the two received a scolding from the two adults, but they were also comfortable for what happened. The two patriarchs of the house knew from experience that being parents was not an easy task, especially if they had a perverted son who had figures of breasts in the sand of the public park. Note: this is seen in the manga. At the end of it all, both parents advised the young people who accepted the wisdom of both, and so the food turned out to be more delicious than it already was, sharing a beautiful family moment. Once dinner was over, Issei would be on the living room couch cradling Kurenai in his arms, who after drinking her milk and burping was getting ready to sleep. Before eating her meal, Akeno apologized to her son for the emotional damage she caused him, swearing that she was not going to make the same mistake again. Kurenai, for her part, could only laugh and enjoy the warm pampering her mother made her, happy to see her mother renewed, and all thanks to her father. Everything is fine, son. Goru sat next to his son, and the younger brown-haired boy agreed. Yes, Dad, Kurenai seems to be making it easy for me this time. The boy noticed that Kurenai had already fallen asleep in his arms. Well, babies sometimes manage to understand their parents' emotions, and he is surely thanking you for helping his mother. Goru looked at his sleeping grandson while speaking. Well, if your way of thanking me is to let me sleep for 8 hours, then I will be grateful for your kindness. At those words, Goru laughed. Keep dreaming, son. Dreaming costs nothing. Goru placed his hand on his son's shoulder. I'm proud of you. Thanks. I thought you'd be upset about being a father at 17 and stuff. The boy got nervous about what he said. Well, a normal father would be, but seeing as you come from a lineage of decent perverts, scolding you would only be foolish. Goru was sincere, and Issei understood at first what his father meant. Well, you're right about that. Issei looked at the stairs and noticed Akeno walking towards the bathroom carrying a bath towel with her. The brown-haired boy's brain generated an idea, and that idea let out that classic perverted look that the Hyoudou possessed. Goru looked at him and knew what his son wanted. Without saying anything, he took his grandson from his son's arms and with a nod of his head told him to go. Without saying anything, the brown-haired boy jumped to fulfill his fantasy. Even if you don't believe it, my grandson, your father looks a bit like your grandfather when he was a teenager. He laughed at his comment, and without anything else to do, he went towards the stairs to the second floor. On Issei's part, the brown-haired boy silently opened the bathroom door, noticing that his girl was already inside the bathroom. He stealthily and carefully took off his clothes until he was naked on tiptoe. He approached the glass door and pushed it aside. Akeno-chan, your man came to take a bath with you, he exclaimed excitedly before noticing the second presence that was in the bathtub. Issei Hyoudou, what the hell are you doing? Miki, who cared about her son's scream, got up from the bathtub with her arms on her waist and an annoyed look directed at her son, who, upon seeing his mother without clothes, ended up burning her eyes. You better let that up, little friend, go back to sleep, or you'll see when he comes out. Era Juju Akeno, who was under the shower, could only laugh at her partner's expression when he saw his mother as God brought her into the world. It was something that for Issei was a nightmare. The chestnuts, dragon, came as soon as it left. All the emotion of his fantasy vanished and the desire to flee was foolish, but his mother's words only led to the unfortunate chestnut ending up with another trauma. Or do you want to get Akeno-chan pregnant again and also get your mom pregnant so she can give you a little brother? Is that what you want, are they? Issei's ears bled at those words, and the brown-haired boy's brain inevitably created that fantasy to the lesser brown-haired boy's horror. And with the mental image stuck in his head, the brown-haired boy closed the bathroom door, took his things and fled to the laughter of the females when they saw the funny side. And so another night concludes at the Hyoudou residence, wondering what tomorrow holds for this lovely couple. Chapter 7. Fixing the messes? In a waiting room of any hospital, Issei Hyoudou was in the waiting room with his father, who was stuck on the roof of the hospital due to an anxiety attack of his son upon learning that he was soon going to have another baby, thus adding another member to the Hyoudou family. The hours passed and the crying of a baby was heard through the door of the operating room. Issei, knowing that it was his baby, was quick to take his father off the roof to shake him like a rag doll due to his great excitement at being a father again, while Goru only prayed that his son would calm down and let him go. A nurse passed through the door and called the only two people with the last name Hyoudou. Issei went to the nurse and asked for his wife's room number. The nurse kindly told him, and the brown-haired boy did not hesitate to run in that direction, followed by his father, still dizzy from his son's shaking. Upon reaching the room where his partner the brown-haired man only saw a woman and a baby covered by a blanket, and without thinking he took the baby to hug him and adore him. "Oh, I can't believe Kurenai now has a little brother. Thanks for this beautiful gift, Akeno," the boy commented happily before a voice caught his attention. Era, what are you talking about, Anata?" The brunette turned her head only to see Akeno in the doorway with her baby in her arms. "Akeno? Shouldn't you be in bed resting because of the baby?" Issei didn't understand what was happening, but something deep down alerted him to the horror. "I don't know what you're talking about, Anata. You didn't get me pregnant when you went into the bathroom that day. The one who did put a bun in the oven was your mom, darling." The brown-haired boy's skin color changed completely to white. His arms trembled, and in a very robotic way he looked back at the hospital bed to see the person lying there, and in his horror it turned out to be what he feared. "Issei, darling, can you give me back your little brother so I can feed him, please?" As if this wasn't strange, his mother looked at him with a smile, while the brown-haired boy simply had no words to say and not even a soul to scream for the simple fact that he shot his own mother. In reality, Issei's room. The chestnut woke up suddenly, and in his state of shock he screamed up high, and his scream sounded like that of a goat. The scream was heard from outside and everyone who passed by the house heard it, and that person was the mailman who was passing by, getting a scare from the unexpected scream of a goat. But that scream scared away the dog that was about to bite him from behind, so that scream was not so bad. Returning to the inside of the room, Akeno began to wake up after a few seconds while Issei just lay back down trying to erase all memories of that horrible nightmare that was generated because of his mother, leaving the question what kind of mother would have such a relationship with his own son. Or that there was an alternate reality where he had his mother and two sisters in a very horny and inseparable relationship. I mean, what reality would that be? While Issei was thinking that, in another part of the Issei verse, an Issei who was bucking his mother and his Aunt Venelana sneezed when he felt someone talking about him, but that didn't stop his action and he continued with his thing. Something happened and Nada Akeno surrounded the boy with her arms and brought him closer to her and her gifted body. "It's not every morning that you wake up screaming like that," she laughed at the last thing while the brown-haired boy just sighed resignedly at that. "It's nothing, it was just a nightmare, a horrible, scary nightmare." A chill ran down his spine into the memory, being comforted by his partner. Yeah, Nada, it was just a dream, but if you're still affected, your female is here to comfort you and make you forget your problems." Akeno's flirtatious and mischievous tone made the brunette's ears ring. He forgot about the bad and concentrated on his girl. "Then we have time to play with fire. Before Kurenai wakes up like my parents." The brown-haired boy's saber was slowly coming out of his sheath and Himejima fearlessly took the edge of the weapon with his bare hand. "Aren't you afraid of danger, darling?" Akeno asked her lover. "I eat danger for breakfast, my dear," the brown-haired boy replied, cutting off all distance to claim his girl's lips. "That's my man," was what Akeno thought as she devoured her dragon's mouth with great passion. Both father and mother cut all kinds of distance from the physical to the emotional and mental. Both young people just wanted to show their love and try to calm the fire that burned inside their hearts with hand games in their lower areas, followed by hot rubs and dirty, sweet, sadistic and sexual comments, which only made the fire last longer, making the duo cover equally, and leading both young people to raise the level of their teenage heat and horniness. Akeno mounted the boy and Issei took her by her fleshy and thigh delicious, which further heated Akeno's internal fire that was sweetened by her good dose of potassium from her favorite type of banana, a large and accommodating banana worthy of the man to whom she gave her hybrid heart. The moment of passion that could be said to have been taken from the most vanilla and lustful hentai possible was about to happen right there, a moment referring to the mark of Captain America, who understood the reference of the H scene of any vanilla hydrogen. The moment, it was so perfect that nothing could go wrong. Or well, it would be perfect if it were the fact of living alone, and not having a baby who just woke up in his crib. Which does not apply to the couple who did not live alone, and had a baby who had just woken up. "Issei, breakfast is ready," was the announcement he heard from his mother at the same time he saw her open the door to her room. A same event that was followed by Kurenai and her capricious action to satisfy her childish hunger. "There, honey, calm down. Oka-san is coming to the rescue," Akeno said, getting off her shoulder to go tend to her treasure, leaving Issei to his own devices. You have to be kidding, Issei whispered in disbelief as Akeno's burning heat was extinguished at the gentle breath of his son's crying. What are you complaining about, are they? The same thing happened to your father when you were born, so get used to it, son. His mother spoke, leaning on the threshold of her son's room, something that bothered the aforementioned. Oka-san, you can go now and please respect my privacy. A little tired of having his mother's eyes on him, the boy covered his already sleeping snake while Mickey only snorted at Issei's complaint. I brought you into the world, I bathed you and changed your diapers. There is literally nothing on you that I have seen before, and I am glad that your little friend grew up. When I saw him for the first time, your father thought that you were not his son. After all, he has it as big as a forebra. I understand now. Just get out embarrassed and traumatized by the image that formed in his mind, the brunette in his outburst threw one of his pillows at his mother, the same object that covered his male member. In the end, Mickey smiles in victory and retreats to the living room, leaving Akeno laughing with her son and Issei agonizing over the embarrassment he suffered earlier in the day. And so a new morning begins for the great Hyoudou family. At the table in the Hyoudou residence morning, the Chestnut family was enjoying the food made by the matriarchal Hyoudou, who happily enjoyed the family moment with her husband, son and her new daughter, along with her grandson, who just watched in silence. Issei also looked at him, and the baby looked at him, entering into a duel of glances as if they were two street dogs trying to guess what the other's next action would be, but in the same way either of them came to anything. They continued looking at each other until one of them blinked, declaring defeat, and that someone was the father of the blessing. Damn, I lost, the brown-haired boy commented while bringing the chopsticks with rice to his mouth. Son, may I ask why you are competing with your own son? Gora put down his newspaper for a moment to ask about his son's action. I really have no idea, Oto-san. I just saw that he looked at me and just walked by, was his son's response that only made his father sigh. It's normal for a baby to stare at everything. It's a natural process that every baby does, even you did. My son, the warm memory formed in the mind of the matriarch Hyoudou, who could only smile at a good moment in her life, although you spent your time watching at women's breasts on television, but I guess that counted. And once again Issei was humiliated by his mother making the boy eat in silence, while Akeno could only laugh softly at Mickey's comment, and on Kurenai's side she only continued with her mental development. Well, it's time to go, Issei commented while standing at the door of his house. We're leaving, Akeno. 1 second, Anata, let me say one last goodbye to my treasure, Akeno said before filling her son's cheeks with kisses that only made the little one laugh. I thought I was your treasure, the brown-haired boy thought, feeling like his heart was broken. With their farewells already made, the couple left the Hyoudou residence and headed towards Ko Academy. Both young people still remembered the suspension that Sona had given them, but they still had to go to the club for their activities as demons after all. Arriving at an alley out of sight, Akeno opened a magic circle below them both, and the two were teleported directly to the occult club where the other members of the Gremory's clan were waiting for them. Abandoned building occult club. In that place you could see almost the entire Gremory clan and their different assigned activities. Everything was normal, until a magic circle was formed with the Gremory symbol in the center, revealing the newcomers being Issei and Akeno, who came hand in hand. Something that was noticed by Rias, completely changing her good mood to a bad mood that she hid under a serene and calm expression that no one noticed. Good morning, everyone, and you, Bucho, the brown-haired boy greeted all his acquaintances, who welcomed the greeting except for Rias, of course. Good morning to you too, Issei-kun, and Akeno-senpai Kiva welcomed their colleagues and friends as normal. Kiva may have initially felt somewhat uncomfortable with the situation of his new current friend, but after only a few days the Gremory Knight managed to overcome that discomfort and welcome his friend back as if nothing had happened. Maybe at first he felt bad about himself for feeling that way, but nothing prepared him for a situation like that. But fortunately it wasn't a difficult challenge for the blonde. Hello to you too, Issei-senpai, Akeno-senpai. It was Kaniko's turn to greet her superiors, but keeping her sweets away from the duo. After Akeno's horrible revelation at her master's house, a hurt Kaniko threw away all her sweets stored in the club, distrusting that perhaps those sweets also suffered the same fate as the sweets she ate, although saying that she threw them away would be a lie. Rather, she gave them away to some children in the nearest park, believing that nothing bad would happen to them if only she knew that she caused many cavities to all those children who innocently received gifts, from a stranger. Good morning, Asia-chan. Akeno happily greeted the clueless ex-nun who reacted a little late to the greeting. Hey? Ah yes, good morning, Akeno-san. Asia greeted nervously without being able to look at the raven-haired girl who with just an era, and a light laugh went to her usual place next to her, king. After Asia found out the news, the poor didn't know how to feel about the relationship her friend, Issei, had with him, who was also her savior. On one hand she felt happy for the brunette, but also sad, angry, confused and above all, even though she denies it, envious. Asia refused to believe that this side of her existed, but when time passes and you experience new events and emotions in anyone's life, you manage to discover something new about yourself, and even if we fight to deny it or end up accepting it, the reality is more than clear, we just pretend not to see it. Being aware of that, Asia could only be depressed knowing that she couldn't be as happy as her senpai and her brown-haired friend because she wanted to be in Akeno's place. With that thought, Asia herself avoided being near the brown-haired boy, which led to her currently sleeping in the club or in Rias's apartment where she was welcomed. For Rias' part, she clearly wasn't entirely happy for her dear best friend. After all, it was hard to accept that the boy who came to her heart was dating the person she trusted the most. Rias's envy led her to form a plan that if she were aware of her actions she would realize that what she was doing was wrong, but jealousy prevented her from being aware of them, and that led Rias to take a path that could destroy her most precious bonds for her. Issei, Akeno, isn't there anything you should tell me before acting as if nothing happened? Rias's calm and angry tone made both of them somewhat nervous. They knew well what Rias was referring to. The couple, knowing the inevitable, stood in front of the desk occupied by their mistress, and with a well-formed bow, the couple apologized. I'm sorry for the trouble we caused due to our ineptitude, Bucho. I'll take responsibility for both of us. The brown-haired boy spoke determinedly, hiding all traces of fear, but he wasn't the only one. I, Akeno Himejima, queen of Rias Gremory, heiress of the Gremory's clan, for my actions that embarrass my master, I assume full responsibility for the act of both of us accepting any punishment said by my mistress like Issei. Akeno took all the blame for what happened the day before. The brunette did not want her beloved to suffer for her whims. What Issei had to endure was enough, but seeing that he continued to take the blame for both of them made Akeno also insist on being the one to take the punishment for both of them. Akeno would never be as selfish as she did before. She paid dearly for that lesson when her treasure was hurt and her beloved's heart was wounded because of her. This time Akeno would be the one washing the dirty dishes and not the man who came to her heart. Rias, for her part, remained silent, listening to the words of her pieces. The love they both had for each other was sent by the Gremory, but she held back to maintain her elegance as a high-class devil, taking a breath and sighing and thinking about her next words long enough to hide her bad mood from the cute couple in front of her. Well, since I see that both of you want to take all the punishment for each other, as your king, I am the one who has the final say and my words will be heard. Both young people in front of the Gremory nod once they finish their bow. Well, first, Issei, the aforementioned fights against his nerves to let out even a drop of sweat. Your punishment will be to distribute all the puffs that were accumulated by your days of absence, followed by doing the same with Asia's part. At first the brown-haired boy didn't see that punishment as so bad, but when the redhead snapped his fingers and a magic circle formed next to him, the idea he had at first soon vanished when he saw the tower of boxes full of those floating things. You have a week to deliver everything, or else your punishment for failing will be 10,000 spankings of the power of destruction, and thanks to the fact that you are currently suspended there are no problems with that, or are there? The brown-haired boy wanted to object, but seeing that things were against him he could only cry and nod before taking the first box and leaving the room, being seen off by Kiva and his partner, who sent him a flying kiss. Same as Rias wanted to destroy, but she held back and prepared to punish her best friend. Well, Akeno, I hope you're ready for your punishment. The brunette nods confidently. If her beloved could do it, she could too. Your punishment will be, apart from going and fulfilling your overdue contracts, you will also have to fulfill the contracts of Kiva, Kaneko and Asia. In addition to mine, of course. Rias took a sip from her cup to hydrate her throat. I understand, Rias-sama. Is there anything else besides this? Akeno asked, and Rias seemed to be waiting for that answer. I'm glad you asked. Well, let's say my brother sent me some papers that have to be filled out. I imagine it won't be a problem for you. Akeno replied that there was no problem, and Rias made another magic circle appear where a large box full of unfilled papers came out. Have fun, cheer up. Rias and Akeno with a heavy sigh carried the heavy box before leaving to fulfill her duties. All while Rias waved her goodbye with a friendly smile on her pretty face. As Akeno left the building for better comfort, the remaining members of the club looked at their mistress in disbelief at what they saw. Rias, for her part, just hummed a tune as she poured herself more tea to enjoy her day. Is something wrong? Rias asked, feeling the gazes of her pieces, but they only diverted their attention and said that nothing was happening, causing the Gremry to return to her own world. It was well known that everyone in the club except Issei was aware of their master's emotions, and that she was an expert at hiding her annoyance behind a calm smile. The air surrounding Rias' Gremry was the only thing that gave her away. Although Kiva did not think Rias' way of acting was correct, the knight, due to his survival instinct, did not sting that honeycomb any further for fear of being stung. On Asia's side, she was more focused on her world, ignoring Rias' attitude at times, but the one who knew the most about this type of thing was the quietest of the group, that is, Kaneko. The Gremry Tower, thanks to her habit of remaining silent and neutral in any not-so-chaotic situation, Kaneko had the ability to hear the murmurs of her friends despite the fact that demons were able to capture sounds from a long distance. There were methods that allowed them to circumvent that ability. But for Kaneko it was not an impediment. Thanks to that, Kaneko could hear the murmurs of her king and discover what she and Asia had planned. One would think that Kaneko, being a good companion, would tell her senpai about that plan, but the reality is that the Nico had no intention of doing anything, and the reason was divided into two very important reasons for the loli. The first reason was because Kaneko was still upset with the brunette after Akeno revealed what happened to her sweets, and that it was a sin that Kaneko couldn't forgive. The second reason was because she didn't want to get into trouble with her mistress, not wanting to suffer from exploitation, and also not wanting to receive 1,000 spanks on her cute ass. And the third and final reason was simpler than the other two, and that was because their king's plan was, how to say it, stupid. Just remembering it made Kaneko sigh at how poorly planned Rias' plan was, and that she had heard worse. But if she were honest, that plan would be perfect in a contest of bad plans, still retaining the memory of what she heard that day. The day of Rias' plan, same moment when Kaneko arrived. Kaneko chose to arrive early at the club because she had to throw away all the sweets she had in the room due to some insecurity she had in her head. Being about to take the doorknob, the loli's ears caught two familiar voices that were her mistress Rias and her senpai Asia. Kaneko was not one of those people who eavesdrop, but the talk that was taking place inside the club had awakened the albino's gossipy side, leading her to hide her presence and get closer to the door in order to better hear the conversation of both females. Meanwhile, Rias and Asia's conversation had escalated to the most interesting point of the conversation, and that topic was Rias' plan that Asia was about to tell next. "So what's your plan, Rias-san?" was Asia's question to the Gremry. "Well, if you don't interrupt me, maybe I can say it," Rias commented, amused, but Asia lowered her head because the blonde thought that her question bothered Rias. "Sorry, Asia. I didn't say it to sound bad, but amused." "Oh? I'm sorry, I thought my question bothered you," Asia answered, embarrassed, and Rias, moved, approached and hugged the ex-nun. "I can't stay mad at you, you're too adorable that you give me diabetes." Rias buried Asia's face between her breasts while she still had her in her embrace. "More adorable than Kaneko?" the blonde asked, poking her face between Rias's breasts. "Of course you are prettier than Kaneko." Outside the club, a loud noise was heard being captured by Rias. What was that? "It was probably another broken piece of wood thrown over and over on the way here," Asia replied, separating from the hug. "I have to call for maintenance on this building before it falls apart," Rias commented, crossing her arms, as she no longer had Asia among her skills. Kaneko, in her anger for hearing the words of her king, had, unintentionally, punched the wall next to her, leaving a small hole as a reminder that her fist was there. Still upset, the little albino dragged her right sleeve, leaving her wrist exposed, which had an accessory bracelet with the title, "The Most Adorable in the Club," with Ria's signature on the bottom of the bracelet. With just one pull she detached herself from said object, and she threw it somewhere in the hallway where she was. With the bad mood expressed on her face, Koenko returned her attention to the door, hoping she hadn't missed anything of the conversation Rias and Asia were having, although the Gremry's words weren't going to go unpunished for Kaneko. Okay, Asia, now without interruptions I will explain to you what my plan is about. Or rather our plan. Rias puts her hand on Asia's shoulder, and the nun just nods in confirmation. Tell me, what is the thing that Issei loves the most in the whole world? Akeno-san and her? Asia answered, and Rias shook her head in the blonde's confusion. No, my little and desecrated Asia, remember that our dear Issei-kun loves two things, and those two are either Akeno nor her son. So what are those two things? Asia didn't seem to understand where Rias's words were going, but seeing her smile was a sign of the suspense response. Well, Issei-kun's greatest love is these babies. Little Asia. Rias shamelessly took her apace with her hands, raising them in front of Asia's face, who seemed not to understand what she was referring to. I can't understand what exactly she means by her breasts. Asia was lost, and Rias only chose to explain her plan in more detail. To put it simply, we will use our charms to seduce Issei so that he falls before us with his lust against him, was Rias' summary while unconsciously playing with her breasts in front of Asia. Are you talking about seducing Issei-san so that he falls for our charm? Asia asked while watching Rias playing with herself, and the aforementioned agreed at the nun's words. I'm not sure that will work. Even Asia saw Rias's idea as a bad plan, that is to say, maybe if the brunette was a man over 40 years old. But he is only a 17-year-old teenager with a level of lust that exceeded times 10 or times 20 the normal level of lust of a pubescent teenager. But Rias foolishly or blindly believed in her plan. There, Asia, you are not seeing the whole picture. Rias stood behind the nun and gently took the blonde's developing épée. Tell me what you think. A couple with a child at an early age is like. Rias began to massage the blonde's chest, saddening her. Well, I don't know. Asia unconsciously enjoyed Rias' massage. You don't know exactly, but fortunately I do know. Rias leaves Asia's breasts alone and goes to her shoulders. Young parents, despite the responsibility of raising a baby, also have their needs. Like, for example, Asia enjoyed the movement of the Gremmery's hands, awakening something that was hidden in her heart. Example of pleasure. I whisper near the nun's ear, and that turns her on. They are both still young and need to release some energy. But how can they do it when they have a baby to take care of, which leads to frustration and bad mood due to the lack of pleasure in the relationship? So what happens next? Asia asked, more entertained by the pleasure of the massage. Then the couple fights happen, the distances, and then the cheating. Rias paused before continuing. Once Issei-kun is frustrated, we will make sure to keep Akeno busy, and once our brunette is alone, well, let's just say it will be hunting time for the lionesses. At the revelation of the plan, Asia showed a slight doubt, but due to Rias' relaxing massage, the pleasure occupied more space in her head, blinding the nun, who ended up agreeing to be part of Rias' plan for the happiness of the capricious and spoiled demon, who also let herself be carried away by the massage, taking roles in the scene that was forming in the occult club. Oh, Asia, it's a shame that your boyfriendship broke up with you, Rias commented, starting to massage with more enthusiasm. But Rias-san, I don't have a boyfriend, Asia commented, confused. Exactly, he never existed, Rias said in a seductive tone that made the nun melt. Rias-san, the nun called out to the aforementioned. Yes, Asia, Rias answered. I want you to penetrate me, I spoke in a trance of pleasure, the same as Rias. Class is over. Rias was about to turn off the lights in the place when she managed to hear the sound of the door. Before a scene Yuri would form in the club, Kaneko thought that she had already seen and heard too much, so she took both girls out of her bubble before it was too late, knocking on the door of the room, which was loud enough to make both girls react. The same ones who, seeing what they were about to do, took distance and fixed themselves as much as they could before the door of the club was opened by Kaneko, who acted as if they were a newcomer. Oh, Kaneko-chan, welcome, Rias greeted, who was reciprocated by the aforementioned. How are you, Kaneko-san? Asia welcomed the same, and the same greeting was also reciprocated. Good morning, Asia-senpai, and Rias-sama, once she finished greeting the albino girl, went to do what she had planned to do before hearing the gossip. It was definitely going to be a long morning for little Kaneko. Back in the present club room, Kaneko sighs as she tastes her sweets, just remembering that talk makes her feel disappointed in Rias and her way of acting like an elementary school girl. But even so, she would stay out of the matter for her own good and that of her classmates, letting everything flows as it should. Leaving as the only question, how is the unfortunate perverted brown-haired senpai doing? elsewhere in Ko with Issei. While the others were enjoying their day under the cool club lounge, the unfortunate Issei Hyoudou was having, well, not a very good day, let's say. "Kill me," was what Issei exclaimed while dragging his broken bicycle. After leaving the club, the brown-haired man spent the next 2 hours of his day walking from location to location handing out pamphlets that people took only to later throw them away or keep them, a 50-50 split to sum it up. At first it was no problem for the chestnut, but unfortunately as the minutes passed while she stood under the burning sun, things had turned bad for the chestnut. When he was on his way to another location riding his bike, a dog began to chase him with clear intentions of wanting to bite the brown-haired boy's leg. Issei, in his defense, only accelerated to lose the dog and he succeeded, but because he did not look ahead he ended up on a descent that ended with him crashing into a tree, damaging his bike and putting it out of service. With no other options, Issei continued on his way dragging his bike along with the rest of the pamphlets to be delivered under the gaze of the sun that only continued to emit light and heat. "It's so hot I don't think I can go on like this." Leaving the bike parked under a tree, the chestnut tree lay down under its shade in an attempt to cool off and regain strength. Closing his eyes to relax and perhaps take a short nap, his cell phone would ring from his pocket. Curiosity called him and the brunette took out his phone to see a message, which was a message with a photo, and upon seeing his content all fatigue or tiredness vanished from the chestnut's body and mind, leaving only a smile and his recovered spirits. The message said, "Fun moment between his grandmother and her grandson," followed by the photo where Mickey was seen giving Kurenai a bath in the sink. His son seemed happy since his smile could be seen, a smile that sweetly warmed the brown-haired boy's heart, added to the smile of his mother and father, although the third one could not be seen. But then he received another message with a photo, this time being his father dressing Kurenai, only in this one his father does not smile, but the opposite. The second photo showed Goro changing Kurenai, starting with her diaper, but the only difference there was that Goro was covering his face because Kurenai was peeing on his face, something that was known as a surprise attack by any evil baby, but it was still funny for the brunette and for Mickey, who was the one who took the photo. Issei put his phone away again and stood up. He slapped his cheeks a couple of times and once again his strength returned as if he had taken one of the hermit seeds from Dragon Ball. He took his bike and headed off on his journey towards his new destination. "I can't rest now, I have to finish and then go home to my family. It's not time to rest but to work, even if the sun's rays attack him. That won't stop the motivated Hyoudou, who was determined to complete his punishment." Crossing a pedestrian crossing once the light indicated him to advance, the brown-haired boy, without noticing, passed next to two mysterious people covered by a white tunic that hid their faces. Ignorant of the two presences, the brown-haired boy continued on his way without knowing that he would soon see those two presences again, but with different intentions that could be good, or maybe bad. But that is a story for another day.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.